A filthy doctor in the neurosurgery department delivers the news that the young gremlin sitting before him is suffering from tremors. As the dumb boy stares down at his hands shaking while trying to use a computer mouse, the doctor clarifies that it is specifically a case of tremors. The baddie mother, looking quite anxious, wonders if this is going to be a major problem for her son's future, but the doctor reassures her that with proper medication and care, the boy will be able to live a perfectly normal life without any issues. While the mother breathes a sigh of relief, the little guy looks up and tells the doctor that something else is shaking besides his hands. The doctor, thinking he is being helpful, explains that the tremors can sometimes occur in the neck or the jaw as well, but the boy quickly points out that the shaking is not happening in those places either. Both the mother and the doctor are left looking quite confused, until the boy opens his mouth wide to show them exactly what he means. To their absolute shock, his tongue is vibrating at an incredible speed, leaving the people staring in pure horror at the strange sight. It is clear that this is a child who is different from everyone else, and because of this unique condition, he ends up living a life that is unlike anyone else's as well. As the years pass and the boy grows into a big boy, he reflects on how he has felt strange since he was young and how much he used to hate that so many parts of his body would constantly tremble. However, as time went on, he began to stop viewing his tremors as a disease and started looking at them as a special ability. While spending some personal time alone in his room and utilizing his high-frequency hand movements, he realizes that what once felt like a curse has become a very effective tool for his grip training sessions. He still remembers a moment from his childhood when he offered to give his grandmother a shoulder massage, and the intense vibration from his hands was so aggressive that the poor woman let out a scream of delight while her dentures nearly flew right out of her mouth. Back then, the young boy wondered if his strange ability would ever truly be of help to someone, though looking at his hands now as a big boy, he feels a bit skeptical about the whole thing. After finishing his morning routine, he stares at his buzzing palms and wonders where on earth he is supposed to use a skill like this in the real world. His deep thoughts are interrupted when he realizes he is going to be late, prompting him to rush out the door and head to his job at the local convenience store. Yoo-jun hurries toward the convenience store and bursts through the door to find his boss already there. She greets him with a smile, noting that this little guy actually managed to show up early for once. Looking at her, Yoo-jun is reminded of how pretty she is, and he tells her she should probably head home and clock off for the day. She gets a kick out of him calling her Nuna instead of boss, playfully telling him to show some respect even though she's clearly enjoying the compliment. Yoo-jun considers her to be incredibly kind-hearted and considerate, especially since she looks out for him so well. She reminds him about a shipment of alcohol arriving later and tells him to keep an eye on the inventory, even offering him some food if he gets hungry. Yoo-jun is genuinely grateful, thinking about how he initially mistook her for a young landlady when he first moved to Seoul. He recalls the interview where he practically had to beg for the job because she was hesitant to hire someone with his living situation, proving that he can be quite a persistent little monkey when he wants something. Back in the present, the boss starts rubbing her sore shoulders, explaining that she overdid it, moving stuff around earlier. Yoo-jun chides her for not waiting for him to do the heavy lifting, but she insists she can still handle that much on her own. She mentions that her daughter bought her a massage gun recently, and describes how the high-frequency vibration helps her muscles relax when the high-volume end touches her. Yoo-jun has a sudden realization about what kind of workout device she is likely talking about, but he keeps the thought to himself and simply promises to handle the moving work starting tomorrow. She finds his concern adorable and tells him to go put on his uniform, but Yoo-jun can't help but wonder if his unique condition could actually be useful for once. He speaks up and offers to give her a massage himself. The boss starts to laugh it off, telling the dumb kid that her shoulders aren't actually that bad, but she suddenly freezes in absolute shock. She stares down in horror as Yoo-jun's hands begin to blur into a high-speed vibration right in front of her. Panic sets in as she wonders if he is okay and why his hands are moving like that, but Yoo-jun just looks at her calmly and explains that he was diagnosed with tremors when he was just a young boy. Yoo-jun opened up about his issue and shared that he had gone through a lot of hard times because of them ever since he was young, but he had eventually gotten used to it. The boss looked at him with deep concern, softly calling out his name. He apologized for suddenly saying those weird things, clearly feeling flustered. Yoo-jun scratched the back of his ear awkwardly, a bead of nervous sweat rolling down his face as the moment grew tense. The boss hesitated, wondering if she should really receive some kind of service from a young kid like him. After a brief internal debate, she gave in. Yoo-jun quickly pulled out a stool and enthusiastically invited her to take a seat so she could relax her shoulders. The boss sat down a bit nervously and said, "Okay." For Yoo-jun, this was his first time giving a massage to someone so pretty, and the dumbass felt his face burning with embarrassment. He placed his vibrating hands and began the conditioning session right away. The high-frequency vibrating hands worked her muscles with surprising power. Worried he had gone too far, Yoo-jun asked if she was all right and apologized in case it hurt. To his relief, she told him to keep going. He continued the thorough hand endurance workout on her shoulders. The boss admitted she had only been a bit surprised at first. Yoo-jun gently asked if she was feeling refreshed. She replied that yeah, she really was, especially because of the strong vibration. The full-body training sesh carried on, delivering deep relief to her tired muscles. The boss sighed with happiness, saying it felt so good and refreshing. Then suddenly, the boss let out a sharp surprised yelp and stood up quickly. Yoo-jun panicked, sweating bullets as he called out to her. He kept apologizing profusely, thinking the idiot had completely ruined everything. In his head, the poor monkey was spiraling, convinced he was screwed and worrying that she was going to report him. But instead of getting upset, the boss walked over to the store door and locked it with a clear click. Yoo-jun called out to her in confusion. She turned around, looked at him, and simply said his name. Then, with a flushed face, she asked if he would train her a little more. And just like that, the special grip training session continued, as the boss leaned in for another round of his unique endurance training. Our story continues at the local neighborhood convenience store, where the hardworking boss, Mi-jong, is busy hauling heavy crates of inventory into the shop. She grunts under the physical strain, muttering to herself about how the suppliers just had to deliver all of her orders at the exact same time. Her lower back is already paying the price, sending sharp, painful twinges that make her regret placing those orders so long ago. Just as she is lamenting her sore muscles, her phone rings on the counter. It is a text message from her daughter, who lets her know she has just headed out. When Mi-jong asks if there is anything she wants to eat, the sweet girl replies that she wants a home-cooked meal full of her mother's love. It is a heartwarming exchange that brings a happy, emotional tear to Mi-jong's eye. However, life has not been easy for her. Behind her diligent exterior, Mi-jong carries a lot of silent stress. Ever since her partner had an affair and ran away with his new partner, she has had to manage everything on her own. To make matters more complicated, her daughter is completely against the idea of her mother going out again. Left with no other options, Mi-jong has to rely on her own special methods to find comfort. At night, she retreats to her room, pulls out a trusty hand gripper from her nightstand drawer, and treats herself to a grip training session. It is her own way of staying relaxed and getting by without anyone else's help. Then, one fateful day, the peaceful routine at the store is interrupted by the chime of the entrance bell. Yoo-jun bursts through the door, energetically greeting his boss. Mi-jong is pleasantly surprised to see him showing up a whole 30 minutes early, silently praising him for being such a diligent, hard-working young man. Yoo-jun quickly suggests that she should clock out and head home, which makes her view him in a slightly new, rather cute light. But then, the atmosphere shifts slightly. Mi-jong catches Yoo-jun quickly sneaking a glance down at her hands. Instead of being upset, she stands tall, feeling a wave of pride and thinking to herself that she definitely still has it. She quickly catches herself, though, scolding her own mind for having such sussy thoughts about a younger coworker. After all, she tells herself she is just an aging woman and shouldn't get carried away. Trying to play it cool, she starts rubbing her sore neck and shoulder, explaining to him that she overdid it moving stock earlier. That is when this bold little monkey steps up and offers to give her a shoulder massage himself. Mi-jong is caught off guard, stammering that her shoulders really aren't that sore. But before she can fully reject the offer, Yoo-jun holds up his hands, and they immediately blur into a satisfying feeling right before her eyes. Mi-jong stares at his palms in utter disbelief, completely baffled by what is happening and wondering what on earth is wrong with this kid's hands. She is completely overwhelmed by the sheer power of his unique conditioning session, leaving her absolutely breathless, sweaty, and silently marveling at the unbelievable feeling. Mi-jong, who has spent years carrying the heavy burdens of life entirely on her own, for the sake of her daughter, finally reaches a turning point. Despite briefly questioning what she is doing, the hard-working boss makes a firm decision to stop holding back her own muscle-building desires. She hangs a temporary closure sign on the glass door of the convenience store, choosing to shut out the rest of the world for a little while. A highly nervous Yoo-jun follows her closely, desperately trying to apologize for his earlier slip-up. The flustered young man admits that his strong hands had accidentally wandered toward her workout bags before he even realized what he was doing. But instead of reprimanding him, Mi-jong completely stuns him by telling him to go ahead and open the secret bag. The clueless monkey is left utterly bewildered, struggling to process what his boss could possibly mean by such an unexpected request. Seeing his hesitation, Mi-jong takes matters into her own hands. She gently grabs Yoo-jun's hand and places it directly on her bag, urging him to use his unique, strong palms to open and take out the tools for a direct endurance training session. With all doubts cleared away, they begin a high-intensity endurance training session. As Yoo-jun's powered hand conducts a powerful hand endurance workout, Mi-jong is left completely breathless and flushed, experiencing the relief of this highly proper training. The scene shifts to the bustling university campus, where Yoojun finds himself sitting in a classroom, completely lost in thought. His mind quickly drifts back to Mijong, but his thoughts spiral into a vivid daydream of his boss in an exercising state, imagining her joining him for an intense conditioning session. Before his imagination can go any further, he snaps back to reality with a sudden, panicked jolt that leaves him visibly shaken. His classmate, Hyunsoo, notices the sudden outburst and asks Yoojun why on earth he looks so incredibly terrified all of a sudden. Hyunsoo quickly changes the subject, apologizing for startling him and asking if Yoojun plans on attending the upcoming opening lecture party. Yoojun confirms that he is indeed going, and Hyunsoo happily agrees that they should head over together in a little while. Soon after, the group arrives at a lively local restaurant for the celebration, raising their glasses for a roaring toast. As Yoojun takes his very first sip of beer, the bitter taste of the alcohol hits him hard, forcing him to make a face as he realizes that this must be what maturity actually tastes like. While Yoojun is still recovering from his bitter drink, an older classmate with a chin-strap beard leans in, asking the younger students for their names. Yoojun introduces himself, only for the guy to smile warmly and remark that Yoojun is actually quite cute. This overly friendly classmate immediately starts invading Yoojun's personal space, rubbing his shoulder and making the poor guy feel incredibly uncomfortable. Yoojun silently screams for help in his head, desperately declining the guy's persistent offers for more food, extra drinks, and a secondary outing later that night. Sitting nearby, a blonde classmate gets a massive kick out of Yoojun's obvious suffering, laughingly telling him that his helpless misery is absolutely hilarious. Just as Yoojun is reaching his limit with his overeager admirer, someone taps him on the shoulder from behind. Still on high alert, Yoojun assumes it is another unwanted advance and reflexively tries to decline, shouting in a panic before he even looks. However, he quickly realizes his mistake when he turns around to see a remarkably attractive woman with dark hair and glasses who politely asks if the seat next to him is taken. Yoojun eagerly welcomes her to sit down, only to be completely stunned when another classmate reveals that this youthful-looking woman is actually one of their university professors. As the professor accepts a drink while sighing about how tired she is, Yoojun finds himself completely captivated by her stunning looks, silently celebrating that university life might actually be the greatest thing ever. The gathering soon transitions into a lively round of a classic Korean drinking game called Mountain Over Mountain. Yoojun explains the rules, noting that each player must perfectly copy the previous gestures before adding a unique one of their own, with a humorous warning to keep things friendly and polite. A short-haired classmate starts the game with a simple drinking gesture, but as Yoojun's turn approaches, his anxiety begins to spike. When it is Hyunsoo's turn, the bold classmate decides to do whatever he wants, copying the first gesture and then adding a highly proper movement. Yoojun is left in utter awe of his disgusting friend's sheer audacity, marveling at the wild nature of college life. The game intensifies when the next female classmate reluctantly copies the conditioning training gesture and then adds a bold endurance training trick as her new move. Yoojun watches in absolute shock as she shows a special endurance training trick to the beautiful professor, leaving our dumbfounded protagonist convinced that university life is truly full of endless surprises. The drinking game continues as the group watches eagerly, realizing that things are about to get quite challenging for the beautiful professor. Despite admitting that the situation is a bit difficult, she boldly decides to take her turn anyway. She smoothly copies the initial drinking gesture and then goes on to mimic the special conditioning gesture, leaving the entire table flustered. Sitting right next to her, our flustered protagonist, Yoojun, can feel his face burning up as the professor shifts closer to him. Leaning in with a smile, she politely asks to be excused for just a brief moment as she reaches out and touches Yoojun's hand, sending his heart racing in pure excitement. To Yoojun's absolute shock, the professor leans in and uses a special endurance training trick as her new addition to the game. However, the moment her hand makes contact with his hand, she immediately senses an incredibly strange, high-frequency charge radiating from him. Touching her hand in sheer disbelief, she realizes that they are actually tingling from the intense vibration of Yoojun's unique condition. Intrigued and completely captivated by this sudden feeling, the professor doesn't hesitate for a second. She pulls Yoojun and uses another special endurance training trick. Our lucky idiot is left completely dazed, happily concluding in his head that university life is indeed the absolute best. Meanwhile, the remaining classmates stare at them in dead silence, utterly speechless at the wild turn of events. Pulling back with a blush, the professor playfully claims she was simply too focused on the rules, before gently lifting Yoojun's chin and reminding him that it is finally his turn to keep the session going. Yoojun nervously agrees, realizing he has no idea how he is supposed to top a performance like that, but resolves to try his best since it is still just a game. However, before he can take his turn, he notices that his blonde classmate, Jiu, has suddenly vanished from her seat, prompting the others to wonder if she ran away in a panic. Smiling off the sudden exit, the professor raises her glass for another toast, and Yoo-jun eagerly gulps down his drink, suddenly finding the taste of alcohol to be incredibly sweet. Soon, the rest of the party winds down, leaving only Yoo-jun and the professor alone at the table. When Yoo-jun happily suggests that they should head home, the professor hesitates, asking if he wants to head over to her place for a special round 2 training session instead. Overjoyed by the invitation, Yoo-jun doesn't hesitate for a single second and eagerly accepts. While the professor waits for him outside, Yoo-jun heads off to pay the bill, walking into the night with a massive, triumphant grin on his face. However, his joyful mood is instantly shattered when a sudden, terrifying scream echoes down a dark alleyway. Rushing to investigate, Yoo-jun's eyes widen in horror as he spots Ji-woo being aggressively cornered and grabbed by her hair by an angry man. In a brief flashback to earlier in the night, we learn the real reason Yoo-jun was finally left alone. His chin-strapped male classmate had initially been hovering over Yoo-jun because he thought the young man was cute, but his attention was instantly stolen when 2 incredibly handsome men walked into the restaurant. Realizing his true target had arrived, the jealous admirer abandoned Yoo-jun's table to chase after them, leaving Yoo-jun utterly confused, but thankfully, free to pursue his own training adventures. The aggressive man corners Ji-woo in the dark alleyway, pulling her hair as she cries out in terror, while the hostile brute angrily questions if the poor girl has completely lost her mind. Just as things are looking grim, a loud, furious voice pierces through the darkness, calling the attacker a pathetic lowlife. The man turns around in utter confusion, only to be met with a raging Yoo-jun charging directly at him. Shouting about what kind of idiot would do such a thing, our brave but reckless protagonist launches into the air, executing a dramatic flying kick that strikes the attacker squarely in the chest. Ji-woo watches in absolute disbelief, stunned by the sudden heroic intervention. Unfortunately, the landing is anything but graceful. Yoo-jun crashes flat onto the concrete pavement, instantly regretting his flashy move as he realizes that looking like a total dumbass hurts far more than the actual physical impact. The angry attacker recovers quickly and stands menacingly over him, asking what on earth Yoo-jun is still doing sitting on the ground. Realizing he is in deep trouble, Yoo-jun can only stammer in fear before the ruthless brute retaliates with a brutal kick straight to his face. The man relentlessly beats Yoo-jun on the ground, furiously demanding to know who this interfering idiot thinks he is. Shielding his face from the onslaught of kicks, a battered Yoo-jun desperately begs the man to stop, claiming that he actually has something incredibly important to say. The attacker finally pauses, clicking his tongue in annoyance, and deciding to hear out whatever crazy nonsense this weird kid has to offer. But Yoo-jun was merely baiting him. The moment the man lowers his guard, Yoo-jun springs up and drives his index finger directly into the man's open mouth, initiating an intense, high-frequency vibrating throat conditioning session. Utilizing the powerful, high-speed vibration of his unique tremors, Yoo-jun's energized finger conducts a highly uncomfortable vocal cord workout deep inside the attacker's throat. The overwhelming discharging instantly triggers the man's gag reflex, leaving him violently vomiting all over the pavement. Yoo-jun quickly steps back, wiping his hand in pure disgust, and calling the attacker absolute scum for daring to hurl in public like a total animal. With the tables turned, an enraged Yoo-jun unleashes a barrage of powerful punches on the weakened attacker, yelling at the pathetic coward for daring to lay a hand on a girl. The man desperately begs him to wait, but Yoo-jun continues his relentless pummeling. Just as the attacker seems completely defeated, he finds a sudden burst of adrenaline, screaming in rage and throwing a heavy counterpunch that knocks Yoo-jun flat onto his back once again. Right at that moment, the beautiful professor rounds the corner and gasps in sheer horror at the violent scene, urgently demanding to know what on earth is going on with Yoo-jun. Still lying bruised on the ground, Yoo-jun points directly at the attacker and frantically tells the professor to call the police because the man was assaulting a girl. Ji-woo nods in agreement, visibly shaken by the entire ordeal. The attacker's face instantly pales as he desperately screams that he never actually hit her. But his frantic protests are cut short when Ji-woo pulls out her phone and immediately dials the emergency line. As she reports the assault to the police, the cornered attacker can only shout in pure, helpless despair, realizing his terrible actions have finally caught up with him. With the attacker running away into the rainy night, the professor rushes over to check on Yoo-jun, anxiously asking if he is alright. Our bruised protagonist wipes the blood from his mouth and grins proudly, declaring that he definitely won the fight. The professor remains deeply worried about his bleeding face, but Yoo-jun happily dismisses her concern, joking that he managed to land far more hits. He turns to Ji-woo to ask if she actually called the police, only for Ji-woo to giggle and admit that it was all just a clever bluff to scare the attacker away. Laughing at the trick, Yoo-jun remarks that if he had kept getting beaten up, things might have ended badly, though the professor reassures him that she would have stepped in to save him. Standing before him, a bashful Jiu politely thanks Yoojun for his incredible bravery before heading off to take a taxi home. Once Jiu is safely on her way, Yoojun suddenly winces in pain as his back begins to ache from the rough brawl. Concerned, the professor suggests that they should skip their planned after-party and head straight to the hospital instead. Yoojun laughs off the idea of a hospital visit, insisting he is perfectly fine, which prompts a smiling professor to suggest that they head straight to her place instead. Yoojun's eyes sparkle with excitement at the proposal, though as they arrive at her massive apartment building, he nervously wonders if it is truly all right for him to enter her home. The professor playfully teases him for bringing that up only now, welcoming him into the quiet hallway and reassuring him that they are completely alone. Yoojun steps inside, politely excusing himself as he struggles to get his shoes off in his excited state. However, as they walk into the main room, he is absolutely stunned to find the entire apartment in a state of complete chaos, with trash and empty bottles scattered everywhere. The embarrassed professor apologizes for the massive mess, but a polite Yoojun quickly reassures her that he doesn't mind at all. Resolving to help her clean up, Yoojun picks up a trash bag, but our clumsy boy immediately steps directly onto an empty plastic bottle. He completely loses his footing, slipping and sending himself flying through the air. In a bizarre twist of fate, Yoojun lands face first, burying his head directly into the professor's hand. As his face rests against her, Yoojun is briefly captivated by her pleasant scent, but the sudden contact reflexively triggers his natural high-frequency tremors. The intense, deep vibration from his hand transmits directly to the professor, initiating an unexpected and incredibly powerful full-body conditioning session. The overwhelming feeling catches the professor completely off guard, causing her entire body to tremble with shock. The sheer force of this sudden tremor workout causes her to accidentally lose her grip on her grip training tool hidden beneath her bag. With a small pop, a black grip training tool slips out from under her bag and rolls across the floor. The professor stands frozen and breathless, while a completely clueless Yoojun picks up the mysterious tool, wondering what on earth it is and even bringing it close to sniff it. Terrified of her secret being exposed, the panicked professor screams at him to stop and tackles Yoojun to the ground. A chaotic wrestling match ensues on the floor as she desperately scrambles to snatch the grip training tool back from his hands. Having successfully reclaimed her training tool, the flushed professor realizes she is completely mortified, recognizing how intensely shocked her body felt from Yoojun's tremors. Overcome with embarrassment, she quickly dashes out of the room, leaving a thoroughly confused Yoojun sitting alone on the messy floor. The secret grip training tool accessory flies through the air as the professor forcefully tackles Yoojun to the ground, pinning him flat on his back. While struggling underneath her powerful handhold, Yoojun's eyes wander to a shelf nearby, where he spots an official victory plaque. As he reads the inscription, he is hit with a terrifying realization. His opponent is Park Hae-un, a 33-year-old jiu-jitsu black belt who has won prestigious international competitions and holds multiple professional certifications in physical therapy and sports massage. Before our unfortunate hero can fully process this terrifying revelation, the skilled grappling expert smoothly wraps her hands around his neck, locking him in a brutal reverse triangle choke. Yoojun gasps and coughs in sheer agony, desperately crying out to ask why on earth she is doing this to him. The professor looks down at him with an ominous, glowing gaze, softly calling him her dear Yoojun as she demands to know exactly what he saw. With her powerful hands squeezing his neck even tighter, she menacingly whispers that she is thinking of doing some truly terrible things to him. Terrified for his life, the poor monkey desperately tries to lie, crying out that he saw absolutely nothing. But the professor refuses to buy his story, tightening her vice-like grip and accusing him of being a liar. Gasping for air, the panicked young man completely breaks under the intense pressure, screaming out the truth that he saw her secret grip training tool. Even after hearing the truth, the ruthless professor refuses to release him, calmly pointing out that she never once promised to let him go. As her powerful grip remains locked around his neck, Yoojun's vision begins to blur and his consciousness starts to fade, leaving him desperately realizing that he must find some way to escape this suffocating physical hold before it is too late. Under a bright and clear sky, the quiet university campus seems peaceful enough, but inside the professor's office, a rather sussy conversation is already taking place. A discussion begins regarding a potential volunteering club, with the beautiful Professor Hae-un wondering if a certain student has any interest in joining her team. She argues that with his highly unique skills, he could easily help a lot of people, though she decides to conduct an assessment to test his potential. Holding on to him to feel his muscular endurance, she makes him highly uncomfortable, as the clueless monkey wonders how his constant sussy power could possibly be of any help to anyone. The professor simply smiles and confirms that the intense way his body generates high-frequency vibration is exactly what makes him so special, leaving him to wonder what on earth she expects him to do with a condition like this. This sudden contact immediately triggers a rather painful memory from his high school days, back when a loud scream once echoed through the halls of his old school. A younger, 18-year-old Yoo-jun had tried to help his teacher by brushing something off her shoulder, but his high-frequency tremors caused a massive shock that led to a terrible misunderstanding. The poor teacher had reacted with absolute fury, demanding to know how he could touch her so carelessly, while a flustered Yoo-jun could only apologize and explain his innocent intentions. Sadly, the school rumors spread like wildfire, and the local gossips immediately labeled him a complete creep, leaving him thoroughly traumatized by how easily his condition could be misinterpreted. Remembering that painful past, Yoo-jun hesitates to accept the invitation, expressing his deep fear that he will only end up causing harm instead of actually helping people, since everyone always finds his tremors to be incredibly weird. But the professor gently takes his hands, looking into his eyes and assuring him that there is absolutely nothing weird about his condition, and that he is simply special compared to everyone else. As she feels the warm, high-speed vibration radiating from his palms, she softly remarks that it actually feels quite nice and reassuring, making the nervous young man realize that he might actually have the power to help others after all. Fully encouraged by her kind words, the naive idiot happily declares that he will join her volunteering club, but his joy is cut short when she casually instructs him to take off his bag for a quick checkup. Terrified by the incredibly sudden and bizarre request, Yoo-jun lets out a panicked scream and bolts straight out of the office, running down the school hallway as fast as his legs can carry him, while the amused professor watches him flee and quietly remarks on how adorable he is. Knowing she still needs official authorization to get the club up and running, Hye-eun fixes her hair and heads straight down the hall to the director's office. Inside, she meets her senior colleague, whom she politely addresses as her Unnie, only to be questioned about why she suddenly wants to revive a volunteering club that was shut down years ago. To test Hye-eun's resolve and stamina, the stern director reaches out to conduct a very direct physical composure test, forcing Hye-eun to struggle for breath as the director reminds her of the support she provided 3 years prior. Despite the intense pressure, a flushed Hye-eun tries to explain that things will be completely different this time, and that the club's activities will definitely be financially satisfactory for the institution. The director remains completely unmoved, warning her not to mess around, but Hye-eun desperately pleads for one last chance, insisting that her new student is the absolute real deal and possesses unprecedented physical capabilities. To verify these claims, the director applies a bit more pressure, causing Hye-eun's grip training tool to pop out onto the floor. Inspecting the black tool, the director notes with genuine surprise that it has actually grown in size, which clearly proves just how powerful the training effects of Hye-eun's new recruit must be. Completely exhausted and kneeling on the floor, Hye-eun begs her senior to believe her just this once, prompting the director to silently observe her before finally giving her approval, leaving Hye-eun deeply relieved and ready to move forward with her plans. Back in the administrator's office, the stern director is not about to take Hye-eun's word at face value and decides she will need to confirm these legendary abilities for herself. She points out that if the professor is indeed so confident in her new recruit, then this student must be the absolute real deal. Hye-eun, still recovering on the floor, is caught completely off guard by this sudden demand. She agrees that Yoo-jun's skills are indeed genuine, though she nervously wonders when exactly this verification process is supposed to take place. Her anxiety only increases when the director immediately demands to know the current location of their new friend. The scene transitions to the university's physical therapy training room, where a group of onlookers is currently frozen in absolute shock. The surrounding students can only watch with wide eyes and dropped jaws, completely unable to believe what is happening right in front of them as one of the classmates covers her face and screams in sheer amazement. At the center of all this attention is our clueless protagonist, Yoo-jun. During what was supposed to be a standard hands-on physical therapy demonstration, the dumb kid has somehow ended up resting his face directly on a blonde classmate's hand while she lies on the massage table. Instead of realizing how incredibly awkward and sussy the situation is, the sweat-drenched, dazed monkey looks up with a completely blank expression and innocently wonders what brand of soap she uses. This ridiculously out-of-place question is the absolute last straw for the resting student. Without a single second of hesitation, the blonde woman delivers a brutal, high-speed elbow strike directly to Yoo-jun's jaw, sending the poor idiot flying backward through the air as his brief moment of peaceful relaxation comes to a very violent end. The narrative begins inside a bizarre, pink-hued dreamscape where fluffy, red bean buns drift through the air like clouds. Inside this strange fantasy, a completely dressed Yoojun is joyfully leaping and dancing amongst towering bamboo steamers, thoroughly enjoying himself as he cradles a couple of fresh buns in his hands. He suddenly looks down and spots a pair of highly soft, golden, and shining buns resting below. Intrigued and trembling with intense anticipation, the naive idiot approaches the warm, golden surface, his hands shaking uncontrollably from his unique condition. Unable to contain his excitement, the dazed monkey happily faceplants directly between the soft, golden buns, finding himself in a state of pure, uninterrupted bliss. Of course, this delightful dream is actually a highly distorted reflection of a very awkward reality. Back in the physical therapy room, Yoojun is indeed face-planted directly against his classmate Jiyu's hands as she lies on the training table, leaving her completely frozen in shock. As the sweat-drenched Yoojun dazedly wonders what kind of soap she uses, the furious blonde girl instantly unleashes a brutal, high-speed kick straight to his face, bringing a sudden end to his daydream. To understand how our unfortunate protagonist managed to get himself into such a painful situation, we have to look back to what happened just a few moments earlier. Just a short while before the incident, a tired Yoojun had walked into his physical therapy class carrying his backpack, only to be immediately questioned by the instructor about his identity. After coughing awkwardly, he introduced himself as Kang Yoojun, prompting the teacher to click his tongue and tell him to quickly find a 3-man team to work with. Looking around the room, Yoojun spotted a pair of boys chatting in the corner, but he quickly decided to steer clear of them and politely approached 2 female classmates sitting by a training table, asking if he could join their group. As he set his bag down, the blonde girl, Jiyu, turned to look at him with a rather cold expression, and when Yoojun tried to politely offer a friendly greeting, she instantly whipped her head away and completely ignored him. Yoojun could only offer an awkward smile, realizing she clearly had no desire to say hello to him. Hoping for a better response from his other teammate, Yoojun turned to the girl with glasses and offered another friendly greeting, but this only caused the extremely nervous girl to jump in absolute panic. When he tried to introduce himself, she also immediately turned her head away in fear, leaving the poor guy with teary eyes, thoroughly baffled as to why everyone in the class was treating him like an absolute plague. Their awkward silent treatment was soon interrupted when the instructor announced that they would now begin practicing physical therapy techniques as if it were a real-life scenario for the next 40 minutes. Standing in a highly tense line, Yoojun tried to break the icy atmosphere by suggesting they should start, introducing himself once again. The nervous girl with glasses hesitantly introduced herself as Jang Bon, while Jiyu casually gave her name without even looking up from her smartphone. Trying to keep things professional, our positive idiot declared that they should get to work, explaining that they first needed to practice pressing on the relevant muscle areas of the thigh. Jiyu reluctantly agreed to be the patient and lay face down on the table, while Bowen nervously stood by. Yoojun enthusiastically announced that they would begin pressing on the muscles, asking Jiyu if she wanted to start off slowly. As she lay on the table, the proud blonde girl wondered why she was even in this situation, completely confused as Yoojun and Bowen casually discussed targeting the biceps femoris and the gracilis, specifically debating whether they should start with the short head of the muscle group. Bowen hesitantly reached out and pressed on Jiyu's hand, which immediately caught Jiyu off guard, as she internally noted that Bowen's hands were surprisingly strong. Bowen anxiously asked if she was all right or if she had caused any pain, but Jiyu insisted she was perfectly fine and told her she could proceed with targeting the long head of the muscle. Trying to find the correct spot, Bowen asked if she was pressing in the right area to locate the semitendinosus muscle, with Jiyu clenching her eyes and instructing her to move just a little more to the left. But when Bowen attempted to target the semimembranosus, she accidentally applied way too much pressure, causing Jiyu to let out a sharp scream of agony and beg her to stop. A terrified Bowen immediately backed away and apologized profusely, while Jiyu tried to calm her down, claiming it was fine and apologizing for screaming so loudly. Seeing her teammate struggle, Jiyu suggested that Bowen should probably take a break first and let Yoojun take over the pressing instead. A surprised Yoojun pointed to himself, wondering if she really wanted him to try, but the proud blonde girl quickly dismissed the idea, claiming she already knew enough and didn't need any more practice, leaving our protagonist chuckling awkwardly as the session wrapped up. While Jiyu initially assumes that having Bowen perform the exercise would be much safer and far less stressful, Yoojun steps in to offer some much-needed guidance. He politely tells Bowen that he will show her exactly where the semimembranosus muscle is located. Placing his hand on Jiyu's leg to guide them, the young man reassures himself that everything will be completely fine, since this is just a standard classroom exercise. As he points out the target area, Jiyu is suddenly taken aback, blushing deeply as she realizes just how incredibly charged his hands feel against her legs. Yoojun is also silently relieved, celebrating the fact that his hands are actually behaving and are thankfully not charging as he prepares to locate the sussy muscle next. Unfortunately for our naive idiot, his peace of mind is incredibly short-lived. The very moment his fingers make contact with the next muscle group, his tremors suddenly activate at a terrifyingly high frequency. Jiyu lets out a sharp gasp of pure shock at the sudden, intense vibration, prompting a panicked Yujun to immediately pull his hands away while frantically apologizing for the slip-up. But in his desperate scramble to retract his hands, the clumsy fool accidentally nudges Jiyu's smartphone, sending it flying off the edge of the training table. Acting on pure instinct, Yujun launches into a dramatic, mid-air dive to catch the falling device, only to lose his balance entirely and land face-first directly on the training table right behind his classmate. Clinging to the retrieved phone, a thoroughly embarrassed Yujun desperately tries to explain himself, insisting that he was only trying to save her phone from falling. A highly flustered Jiyu takes her phone back, quietly accepting his explanation and trying to move past the incredibly awkward landing. Sitting up on the table, Jiyu reassures him that she is perfectly fine and acknowledges that he definitely didn't do it on purpose. She then looks at his face with deep concern, asking if he is all right. The proud young man claims he is doing great, even though his cheek has swollen up into a massive, round lump. Jiyu offers a sincere apology, guiltily pointing out that his injured cheek now looks exactly like a freshly steamed red bean bun. Yujun simply laughs it off with a giant grin, cheerfully noting that it is perfectly fine because he happens to love steamed buns anyway, leaving his classmate completely baffled by his bizarre sense of humor. But before they can dwell on his strange logic, a sudden booming voice calls out Yujun's name from down the hallway, prompting him to quickly turn around in response. Standing in the corridor is a highly formidable woman wearing a bright red varsity jacket with a T-patch, looking incredibly tough, with her short blonde hair and sharp eyes. Both Yujun and Jiyu can only stare in absolute, jaw-dropped awe as this highly athletic senior commands Yujun to follow her, turning on her heel and marching away with immense authority as our baffled protagonist prepares to face his next unexpected adventure. Arriving at his next destination, Yujun stands in the hallway, staring up at a sign that reads, "Volunteering Department," with a thoroughly confused expression. Standing next to him is the tough athletic senior from earlier, who politely instructs him to head right inside, explaining that they are already waiting for him. However, our naive idiot is completely distracted by her gym figure and, in his highly starstruck state, accidentally blurts out a highly sussy verbal slip-up, thanking her in a rather bizarre way. The senior turns her head to look at him with a deeply suspicious and bewildered expression, while the clueless monkey internally sighs at how stunning she is, completely unaware of his own awkwardness. Fortunately, his embarrassing moment is cut short when the door suddenly swings open and Professor Hyun pops her head out, energetically calling his name. Yujun explains that he heard she was looking for him, to which she happily confirms before ushering him into the room and firmly locking the door behind them. Inside, the mood shifts instantly when the professor forces him to change into what she cheerfully calls the official volunteer work uniform. Standing there wearing nothing but a black face mask and a black fat jacket, Yujun feels his level of embarrassment spike. He awkwardly wonders if these clothes are really necessary for volunteering, but the clapping professor simply assures him that it is a special uniform and that it looks absolutely fantastic on him. Getting highly dramatic, Hye-eun clasps her hands together and pleads for his help, insisting that it absolutely cannot be anyone but him. To sweeten the deal, she pulls out a cash bill and slides it onto the table. Yujun tries to politely decline, explaining that he has a class starting in just a moment and can only help her later, but the persistent professor simply slides a second bill onto the table in response. When the gullible protagonist adds that he also has to head to his part-time job soon, she slides a third bill across the desk, assuring him that it won't take long at all. Staring at the growing pile of cash, Yujun is left completely torn, wondering what on earth he is supposed to do. In the end, the cash is far too tempting to resist. After agreeing to help, Yujun follows the professor as she walks over to a large bookshelf and pulls on a hidden book, which triggers a loud click as a secret door swings open. She invites him to step inside, and the young man's jaw drops in absolute astonishment as he enters a hidden room filled with various specialized endurance training tools and equipment. But his shock only increases when he looks at the massage table in the center of the room and spots the stern director from earlier, also wearing a black face mask and a thick, fat, athletic outfit. Gazing at him coldly, she points out that he is incredibly late and has made her wait for a very long time. Thoroughly panicked, Yujun looks back at the professor, desperately asking who this mysterious woman is. Hyun simply smiles and tells him that he doesn't need to worry and just needs to do what he usually does, leaving him completely flustered as she quietly backs out of the room. The director casually asks if she needs to lie down on the table, to which Yoo-jun nervously agrees, requesting that she sits on the chair so they can begin. As she settles onto the table, Yoo-jun's heart races as he panics, wondering where on earth he is even supposed to start. Resolving to just get to work, he picks up a bottle from a nearby shelf, popping the cap off while wondering what the contents are. A quick flashback reveals that this entire setup was orchestrated by the clever professor who had earlier sweet-talked the reluctant director into wearing the fat jacket, praising her beauty and assuring her that the clothing was all the better for receiving a proper, high-quality training. Later, the scene begins aboard a fast-moving Seoul Metro train, which is currently packed to the brim with morning commuters. Inside the tightly squished carriage, people are grumbling about the lack of personal space and complaining about accidental contact. Yoo-jun is caught right in the middle of this suffocating crowd, pressed directly alongside his classmates, Ji-woo and Boeun. Ji-woo complains about how unbelievably tight the space is, prompting Yoo-jun to realize they must have boarded the train at the peak of the morning rush hour. Looking over, Yoo-jun asks Boeun if she is holding up all right, though Ji-woo is the one who sighs, complaining about how exhausted she is. The young man gently reassures her, telling her to hang on since they won't be on the train for very long. Standing close to her, Yoo-jun catches a fresh, pleasant scent, wondering what kind of delicious aroma it is, before happily realizing that it is the scent of fresh grapefruit. This simple discovery brings a massive, goofy grin to our positive idiot's face, as he thoroughly enjoys the silver lining of an otherwise miserable commute. However, his peaceful moment is instantly shattered when the train suddenly jolts, triggering a heated argument between some angry passengers right behind them. An older man starts yelling about people shoving, only for a furious older lady to scream back, and a full-on brawl quickly erupts in the middle of the carriage. Amidst the chaotic pushing and shoving, Yoo-jun is suddenly hit with a massive force from behind, sending him flying forward and pressing him directly against Ji-woo's bag. The sudden, forced contact causes a highly sussy and completely vibrating reaction from our clumsy protagonist, who immediately panics and feels like his entire life is ruined. He desperately tries to apologize for the accidental collision, but to his absolute amazement, a blushing Ji-woo simply looks back and softly reassures him that it is perfectly fine. As the fight behind them grows even more intense, with passengers yelling and actively throwing punches, the heavy crowd shoves Yoo-jun once again. This time, he is pressed completely flat against Ji-woo's bag, resulting in some highly sussy moves that leaves the poor idiot sweating bullets, while Ji-woo tries her absolute best to keep her composure. Boeun notices the tense atmosphere and asks Ji-woo if she is doing all right, to which Ji-woo quickly tries to play it cool, claiming that she is completely fine. Ji-woo and Yoo-jun both desperately plead for the fighting passengers to take their brawl elsewhere, with Ji-woo breathlessly asking Yoo-jun if he is holding up okay. The flustered young man quickly apologizes again, while she reassures him that everything is fine despite the chaotic environment. Nearby passengers can only watch in absolute awe as the older lady completely overpowers her opponent, with bystanders commenting on how she is a total menace who fights incredibly well. Meanwhile, Yoo-jun's internal excitement mascot sheds cartoonish tears, waving a tragic farewell to his beloved grapefruit scent as the train finally pulls into their station. Exiting the subway, the group finally arrives outside a massive building with a sign identifying it as the Gusan Recuperation Hospital. Yoo-jun is absolutely stunned by the sheer size of the facility, noting how massive it looks. Walking up to the main entrance, he spots Professor Hyun and the rest of their classmates waiting for them. He eagerly calls out to the professor, who turns around with a bright, welcoming smile, happily asking if he managed to arrive safe and sound with the rest of the group. At the main entrance of Gusan Care Hospital, Yoo-jun, Ji-woo, and Boeun finally meet up with the rest of their volunteering group. The classmates warmly greet them, apologizing for arriving a bit late because they got lost on their way. Professor Hyun checks her phone and cheerfully announces that since everyone is finally accounted for, they should head inside. Stepping into the main lobby, the students are highly impressed by the facility, noting how clean and nice everything looks. Hyun introduces them to a sweet elderly nurse named Choi Mi-soon, instructing the group to follow her and help out with caring for the elderly residents. The kind nurse smiles, noting that she is definitely going to need plenty of help today. When one of the students wonders if the professor is heading somewhere else, Hyun explains that she has to step out for a bit to meet with the hospital director. She tells the students to quickly get changed into their uniforms, listen to Nurse Choi, and remember that even though this is charity work, it is a highly valuable learning experience for them. Fully motivated, the entire group pumps their fists and shouts a spirited cheer before heading off to their assignments. The volunteering work quickly gets underway, with Ji-woo and Boeun helping to wash the feet of the elderly female residents in warm basins of water. Meanwhile, Yoo-jun and another male classmate are tasked with carrying heavy boxes of medical supplies like syringes down the hallway. As they carry the boxes, one of the female students massaging an elderly resident playfully waves Yoo-jun over, suggesting he try giving a shoulder massage himself. Pointing to himself in surprise, the helpful young man steps up behind a bald grandfather to offer some muscle relief. But the very moment his palms touch the old man's shoulders, his tremors instantly kick in with massive force. The intense tremor works with such overwhelming power that the poor grandfather's dentures literally fly straight out of his mouth and sail across the room. Yoo-jun and the horrified female students can only watch with wide eyes as the flying teeth cause absolute chaos in the quiet ward. Before Yoo-jun can even try to fix the dental disaster, another nurse runs into the room, dropping her tray in absolute shock and pointing a furious finger at him as she demands to know what on earth he did to their poor patient. Luckily for our clueless monkey, Professor Hyeun suddenly pops her head into the room, urgently calling his name. But the moment she grabs his shoulders to pull him away, the sudden vibrating contact triggers her own reaction, causing her to drop her lollipop. Yoo-jun is thoroughly confused, but she quickly tells him to ignore that, explaining that she actually has a highly specific job for him that only he can do. When the baffled young man wonders what she could possibly mean, she remains highly secretive, ushering him directly into the elevator as they head up to a quiet, restricted floor. Stepping out of the elevator, Yoo-jun asks what this place is, to which the professor replies that they are on the VIP floor, explaining that this exclusive room is reserved for a single individual. Yoo-jun realizes this mysterious patient must be incredibly wealthy, prompting Hyeun to reveal that the resident is actually the ultimate owner of the entire care hospital. A shocked Yoo-jun gasps, but she quickly hushes him as they approach a set of massive double doors. Knocking gently, she announces her arrival, and a deep voice from inside commands them to enter. Inside the luxurious suite, they are met by the owner, a wealthy, bald grandfather with a thick gray mustache, who notes that they are quite late. After the professor apologizes and explains they were busy downstairs, the owner asks if this is the boy she mentioned, noting that he heard Yoo-jun possesses a highly unique skill. A sweat-drenched, extremely nervous Yoo-jun tries to explain that calling it a skill is a major exaggeration and that his hands simply vibrate a little bit. The wealthy old man dismisses his modesty, explaining that he is currently in a desperate position where he needs to rely on that special skill as well. Yoo-jun's bad vibes radar instantly spikes, and his worst fears are realized when the completely proper grandfather calmly requests that Yoo-jun use his tremors to help restore his mana circulation. Our thoroughly traumatized protagonist is left standing in absolute, jaw-dropped horror, completely unable to believe the bizarre task he has just been assigned. The narrative introduces Jang Jinam, a 74-year-old living legend who is the wealthy owner of the care hospital. Born into a very poor family, he was highly industrious, starting his own street food business at the young age of 18. By 24, he managed to set up a small shop, and by 30, he had accumulated enough funds to start his first franchise, rapidly advancing as a successful businessman. Over the years, his empire grew to encompass many different cuisines, seeing massive success in the food industry. However, despite having achieved immense wealth and having everything he could possibly want, he carried a single, highly frustrating concern. In a brief flashback to when he was 34 years old, we learn that the successful businessman suddenly found himself struggling with a complete lack of mana. He panicked, sweat pouring down his face as he wondered what on earth was happening to his body, while his wife lay beside him wondering why he was hesitating to do endurance training. Realizing he had a major mana issue, Jang Jinam spent years visiting every known hospital to find a cure. Desperate for a solution, he was willing to try absolutely anything to treat his condition, including highly painful folk remedies and weight-bearing exercises, but absolutely nothing seemed to work. Many more years passed, and he eventually had to witness the tragic death of his wife. As she lay on her hospital bed, she passed away filled with a long-held resentment toward him. The poor husband wept bitterly by her bedside, apologizing repeatedly for his mana failure and pleading for her to find happiness in the next life. In a highly comedic but tragic twist, even his wife's departing spirit looked back at him with absolute fury, making a highly offensive gesture and cursing him for his lack of mana circulation. Back in the present day, the 74-year-old grandfather points to his mana energy source, which is humorously symbolized by a weeping little turtle in a shell, explaining that he has been completely unable to regain his mana for 40 long years. Overcome with emotion, the wealthy old man suddenly drops to his knees, crying and begging Yoo-jun to help him. A thoroughly freaked out Yoo-jun screams for the professor to help him, but he turns around only to see Professor Hyeun sprinting out of the room at full speed, giving him a cheerful thumbs up, before slamming the heavy double doors shut and locking our poor protagonist inside. Left completely alone with the weeping grandfather, Yujun stares at his hands, realizing he has no other choice. Taking a deep, tired breath, the soft-hearted monkey decides to help, pulling on a pair of sterile blue gloves. The grandfather is absolutely overjoyed, tearfully asking if the young man is truly serious. Stepping up to perform a highly specialized treatment to restore the old man's mana circulation, Yujun utilizes his tremors. Within moments, the treatment works miracles, and the old man's mana energy source successfully revives, with the symbolic little turtle happily waking up. Thoroughly exhausted after the delicate procedure, Yujun removes his gloves and decides to slip out of the room to grab some food, but as he opens the door, the grandfather calls out to him. Turning around, Yujun sees the old man standing proudly, looking incredibly happy. When Yujun asks if he is finished, the grandfather tearfully thanks him, declaring that for the first time in 40 years, he has successfully recovered his mana energy. After successfully completing his task, the wealthy grandfather shouts out a massive, tearful thank you in pure ecstasy. Meanwhile, his young female assistant, who is sitting nearby in the background, looks completely exhausted and decides to light up a cigarette, muttering in disbelief about the wild situation, while quietly asserting that everything is fine now. Deciding he has had more than enough work for one day, Yujun politely announces that he will be heading out now. As he opens the large double doors to make his escape, the grateful grandfather calls out from behind, promising that he will be sure to reward the young man handsomely for his life-changing assistance. Yujun simply laughs awkwardly, offering a polite farewell before quickly stepping out of the suite and shutting the doors behind him. Standing in the quiet VIP hallway, the poor kid lets out a massive, relieved sigh as he waits for the elevator to arrive. However, before he can even catch his breath, he is suddenly startled when a finger taps him on the shoulder from behind, accompanied by a soft request for his attention. The dazed monkey slowly turns around, calmly asking how he can help, only to find himself face to face with a highly unexpected sight. Standing right before him is the young female assistant from the suite, who has hastily thrown on a thick red fat jacket. She is still thoroughly flushed, drenched in sweat, and completely out of breath from the previous situation, staring at our clueless protagonist with a highly dazed and intense expression that leaves him wondering what on earth she wants from him now. The story resumes with a highly flustered Yujun as a firm hand grabs his collar from behind, prompting the startled young man to desperately plead to be let go. But his pursuer, the flushed and exhausted assistant, has no intention of releasing him, desperately begging the clueless monkey to just help her out for a single moment. Before Yujun can even process the sudden ambush, the frustrated woman grabs a fistful of his hair, loudly complaining about how she has worked tirelessly for the director for 5 long years, without receiving any proper conditioning sessions. To make matters worse, she angrily points out that the special endurance training session she had finally anticipated only ended up lasting a measly 20 seconds, leaving her completely not growing any muscles. As the poor kid sheds a tear from the painful grip on his hair, he silently wonders why on earth she is taking her frustrations out on him, but the aggressive woman simply demands that he follow her right away. She drags the protesting student down the hallway, completely ignoring his painful cries as she continues to plead for just a small fraction of his time. Realizing he is completely outmatched, Yujun desperately bargains with her, promising to follow her if she will just release her painful hold. The assistant checks if he is actually being serious, and the moment she lets go, our quick-witted monkey immediately bolts toward the elevator in a desperate bid for freedom. Unfortunately, his escape plan fails miserably, as the furious woman easily chases him down, tackling the clumsy runner to the floor as he helplessly apologizes for his failed trick. While this chaotic struggle unfolds in the hallway, a phone begins to ring inside the quiet VIP suite. The elderly grandfather, Jang Jinam, slowly wakes up from his nap, realizing that he pushed his body far too hard after 40 years of inactive mana circulation. Noticing that the incoming call is from the director, he answers his phone and introduces himself, while the director, sitting comfortably in her room, casually asks how Yujun performed and if the young man was of any assistance. Overjoyed by the inquiry, Jinam flashes a giant grin and gives a massive thumbs up, declaring that the young man was absolutely the best. He ecstatically explains that for the first time in 4 decades, his mana energy has completely revived, allowing him to successfully complete a high-level endurance training session. He even boasts that his assistant, Michelle, was thoroughly shocked by his sudden mana restoration, causing the flustered director to listen in stunned silence as the old man apologizes for getting a bit too carried away with his excitement. The director politely reassures the happy grandfather that she is simply glad he was satisfied with the results, prompting Jinam to promise a very generous reward for Yujun before hanging up the phone. Left alone with her thoughts, the director smiles to herself realizing that Yoo-jun must have gone through a highly exhausting ordeal to achieve such results, and resolves to reward the hardworking student herself. Back in his luxurious suite, Jinam sits on the edge of his bed, reflecting on how he might have been a bit too enthusiastic during his phone call. He suddenly notices that the room is completely quiet, and wonders where his assistant Michelle could have gone. Calling out her name, the old man gets out of bed and begins searching the apartment, but he suddenly pauses in the hallway as a faint, good sound echoes from further down the corridor. Throwing on a purple jacket, the curious grandfather walks slowly down the tiled VIP hallway, calling out for Michelle once again as he follows the strange noises. Later, the heavy door to the emergency stairwell creaks open slightly, and a cautious Yoo-jun peeks out alongside Michelle to make sure nobody is watching. Once the coast is clear, the young man steps out into the hallway, cheerfully flashing a thumbs up and an OK sign, while a thoroughly satisfied Michelle smiles warmly and gestures for him to give her a call sometime. However, their secret exit leaves behind a bit of a mess, as a nearby janitor with a mask and mop stares down in absolute disgust at a large sweat on the floor, angrily wondering what kind of terrible person would make such a mess in the stairwell. Meanwhile, down in the busy registration area of the hospital, the other student volunteers are diligently going about their charity duties. A close-up of Bone's face reveals her quietly weeping, deeply upset about how a young, innocent volunteer is being forced to endure such an incredibly uncomfortable situation in this place. Inside one of the patient rooms, a creepy, elderly patient lies in his bed, flashing a highly unsettling grin as a trembling Bowen begs him to please stop his sussy behavior. Ignoring her plea, the grandfather boldly reaches out and grabs her bag, creepily claiming that she reminds him so much of his own daughter. The poor girl is left sweating and crying in pure terror, desperately pleading with him to leave her alone. The stubborn old man refuses to let go, mockingly questioning what she means by stop and reiterating his excuse about his daughter. But his creepy moment is instantly shattered when the bold Jiu suddenly steps in, coldly asking the old man if he treats his actual daughters with such sussy advances. Startled by the sudden intrusion, the angry grandfather glares up and demands to know who she thinks she is to interrupt them. Jiu stands her ground firmly, pointing out that they came to the hospital to do honest charity work, not to comply with such disgusting behavior. While a panicked Bone tearfully calls out her name, the cornered old man tries to wave it off as a simple misunderstanding. But Jiu refuses to back down, asking if he isn't embarrassed to rely entirely on such sussy conditioning training urges at his advanced age. Infuriated, the grandfather sits up and screams at her to watch her attitude, but Jiu fires right back, declaring that his hand is the one with the bad attitude, and questioning if he even possesses any stamina left to speak of. The old man's eyes bulge with absolute, unbridled rage at the insult to his pride. He suddenly lunges forward, raising his hand to deliver a brutal strike while screaming at her to shut up. Jiu braces herself, closing her eyes in sheer terror as she prepares for the impact, completely unaware that a certain brave idiot is already rushing to her rescue. With lightning speed, Yoo-jun leaps into the frame, taking the full force of the old man's slap directly across his own cheek. The startled grandfather gasps in confusion, but our determined protagonist ignores the stinging pain, staring back with an intense gaze before driving both of his hands directly into the old man's chest. Crying out in utter shock, the grandfather desperately demands to know what the young man is doing. Yoo-jun calmly instructs him to relax, immediately activating his tremors with massive force. The intense vibration courses directly through the old man's chest, forcing a painful scream of agony from his lungs. In a desperate bid to free himself, the furious patient swings a heavy right hook, punching Yoo-jun square in the face and calling him a crazy kid. But our gremlin doesn't even flinch, absorbing the blow with a blank expression, before calmly pointing out that the old man's muscles are simply extremely tight. Digging his vibrating hands even deeper, Yoo-jun confidently promises to help him relax as he unleashes his full vibration muscle conditioning workout. The terrified old man frantically begs him to stop, but Yoo-jun continues his relentless physical therapy. The high-speed vibration surges with overwhelming power, rattling the old man's entire skeletal frame as he lets out a final, breathless scream. The sheer force of the unique therapy works wonders on his stiff muscles, causing the grandfather's eyes to roll back in pure, dazed ecstasy as he breathlessly mutters that he can actually see the bright lights of heaven. This intense release triggers a sudden, dramatic flashback from the old man's past, taking him back to his youth where he was a young boy getting brutally knocked down by a powerful punch in a competitive match, reminding him of what true, raw, physical power actually feels like. The dramatic flashback of the old man's past continues, showing how he was repeatedly beaten down and cornered in his youth during intense schoolyard brawls. As the years rolled by, the young fighter aged into a bitter man, spending his solitary nights drinking heavily and smoking cigarettes in a dark, empty room, slowly letting his physical and mental health decay. The narrative officially introduces him as Lee Do-gwang, a 78-year-old man who lived a completely self-centered life fueled by greed and arrogance, which ultimately left him utterly isolated from the world. But after experiencing Yoo-jun's powerful restorative therapy, Do-gwang finds himself on his knees, crying tears of pure, unadulterated regret as he finally sees the light of clarity. Back in the present, the old man remains on his knees on the hospital floor, weeping loudly while Yoo-jun, Ji-woo, and Bowen stand around his bed, staring at him in complete and utter bewilderment. Yoo-jun, who is sporting a massive, swollen bump on his forehead, nervously asks the old man if he is doing all right, while a thoroughly confused Ji-woo silently wonders what on earth is going on with this dramatic turnaround. Overcome with deep regret, the elderly patient continues to cry like a baby, and after that life-changing intervention, he quietly disappears to live out the rest of his days peacefully in the hospital. With the dramatic hospital incident finally resolved, the scene transitions to a lively city street at night, where the volunteering group has gathered at a local restaurant to celebrate their hard work. Clinking their glasses together for a roaring toast, the students drool in intense anticipation as thick, delicious slabs of beef begin to sizzle on the hot table grill. Professor Hyun proudly tells the group how happy she is that they decided to volunteer, warmly encouraging them to eat as much as they want without any worries. The hungry students enthusiastically agree, but as a classmate with glasses eyes the grill, she notes with intense focus that they need to act fast before all of their delicious meat gets completely burned. Instantly, the entire table unleashes a highly coordinated, rapid-fire chopstick assault on the grill, vacuuming up the beef in a matter of seconds. A shell-shocked Hyun can only watch with a ticking vein on her temple, internally criticizing their complete lack of table manners and wishing that the big persons could eat first, while desperately warning the hungry monkeys that the meat isn't even fully cooked yet. Amidst the eating frenzy, a student brings up the dramatic scene from earlier, mentioning how the creepy grandfather had been making Bowen feel extremely uncomfortable. Ji-woo angrily asks if that old man was completely out of his mind, while another classmate checks in on Bowen to make sure she is holding up all right. Bowen timidly confirms that she is fine, prompting a bruised Yoo-jun to awkwardly point to his massive forehead lump and ask about his own well-being, since he was the one who actually got hit. Ignoring the poor kid's complaints entirely, the professor loudly orders another bottle of soju, while a classmate raises a glass and asks Yoo-jun if he would be interested in going on a blind outing with a design major. Startled by the unexpected proposal, Yoo-jun wonders if they are actually offering him an outing, while Ji-woo joins the group for another cheerful toast. As the bottles of alcohol begin to pile up, a classmate happily points out that they have already eaten a massive amount and loudly calls for a double serving of beef to kick off round 2. A sweat-drenched, mentally exhausted Hyun can only tell them to go ahead and eat as much as they want, forcing a smile as the grateful students cheer. Later in the evening, a concerned Bowen looks at Yoo-jun's heavily swollen forehead, gently asking the tipsy young man if he is really going to be okay. Pouring him another glass of soju, Bowen politely thanks him for his incredible bravery and help earlier in the hospital room, anxiously repeating her concern about his painful-looking forehead. Yoo-jun simply laughs it off with a giant, carefree grin, cheerfully reassuring her that he is completely fine and joking that the massive bump actually makes him look a bit cuter. Bowen blushes and shyly agrees with his ridiculous logic, while a thoroughly exhausted Ji-woo sips her drink in the background, looking completely done with Yoo-jun's goofy antics. The cozy dinner conversation continues as a sweet Bowen pours another drink for Yoo-jun, gently checking if his swollen forehead hurts. The brave idiot simply smiles warmly, telling her not to worry since it is absolutely nothing, while Ji-woo sits nearby chewing her food like a grumpy spectator. Bowen then wonders if it is truly all right for Yoo-jun to stay out so late, to which he replies that it is perfectly fine because he lives quite close by, prompting a happy Bowen to realize that she actually lives pretty close to him as well. Meanwhile, a jealous Ji-woo decides she has had enough of their friendly banter and begins chugging an entire bottle of soju straight. With a loud crash, Ji-woo slams the empty bottle flat onto the wooden table, causing both of her classmates to jump in surprise. A worried Bowen immediately asks if she is doing all right, while a thoroughly confused Yoo-jun calls out her name. Blushing heavily, Ji-woo awkwardly apologizes, claiming that she must be getting a little too drunk, though Yoo-jun gently tells her to take it easy and eat slowly, which brings a subtle, appreciative smile to her face. Suddenly, Ji-woo stands up from the table, prompting Yoo-jun to ask where she is headed. She calmly explains that she is going outside for a quick smoking break, and when our clueless monkey asks if she is heading out alone, she looks back with a smoldering gaze and tells him that she is actually going with him, commanding him to follow her. Yoo-jun is left staring in absolute wide-eyed confusion as Ji-yu confidently steps outside onto the balcony, posing gracefully with her electronic vape while looking incredibly stunning in her tight fat jacket. However, their moment is quickly threatened by a mysterious, dark hooded figure watching them closely from a nearby balcony. The creepy stalker grins maliciously as he recognizes Ji-yu, quietly noting to himself that it has indeed been quite a while since they last crossed paths. Back inside the warm restaurant, Professor Hyun catches sight of Yoo-jun and Ji-yu sneaking out of the room together. She lets out a knowing chuckle, realizing that those two definitely have a sussy thing going on between them. While she playfully teases the rest of the table about the pair's obvious connection, a sussy female classmate decides to take advantage of the quiet moment by sneaking up behind a blushing Bone. Before Bone can even react, the playful classmate launches a sudden physical tickle attack from behind, grabbing her bag and loudly marveling at Bone's surprisingly impressive bag size. The startled girl lets out a panicked squeak as her face turns bright red, thoroughly embarrassed by her friend's overly enthusiastic appraisal. Standing outside in the cool night air, Ji-yu takes a slow puff from her vape, exhaling a soft cloud of smoke as Yoo-jun stands awkwardly by her side. Looking down at his shoes, the young man quietly questions whether there was actually any real need for him to accompany her out here. Their quiet moment is broken when Ji-yu suddenly speaks up, offering a sincere apology that leaves Yoo-jun thoroughly confused as he wonders what she could possibly be apologizing for. Crossing her arms nervously, Ji-yu blushes and explains that she is referring to his swollen forehead, guiltily pointing out that he ended up taking a painful hit for her sake once again. Yoo-jun quickly dismisses her worries, happily insisting that he is perfectly fine and joking that he actually got to land plenty of extra hits on that creepy grandfather anyway, so it was a total win. Hearing his cheerful reassurance, Ji-yu looks down with a soft blush, quietly thanking the brave kid for his protection. Hoping to clarify the situation, Yoo-jun awkwardly wonders if that old disgrace from earlier was actually her partner. This innocent question immediately sends Ji-yu into a roaring fit of anger, as she furiously screams that there is absolutely no way that creepy freak is her partner, loudly explaining that the obsessive stalker simply claimed to like her and has been following her around ever since. A thoroughly startled Yoo-jun backs away with his hands raised in surrender, nervously explaining that he was only asking out of pure curiosity. Looking at her with genuine sympathy, he remarks that she must have gone through a highly exhausting ordeal dealing with such a bizarre stalker, gently asking her if she is doing all right these days. Catching her off guard, his sweet concern causes Ji-yu to blush and stare at him in silent surprise. But their moment is rudely interrupted when the creepy hooded stalker and his two muscular friends suddenly round the corner, mocking Yoo-jun's use of the word disgrace, while smugly admitting that the young man's assessment is actually quite accurate. The stalker demands to know if they were talking about him, leaving our poor protagonist completely frozen in terror as sweat pours down his face. Spotting Yoo-jun's nervous stutter, the bully mockingly tells him to speak up and say it with his chest. Before the trash-talking bully can even finish his sentence, Yoo-jun unleashes a sudden, lightning-fast kick directly into the stalker's midsection, sending the creepy guy screaming in agonizing pain. Without giving him a single second to recover, our brave idiot follows up with a powerful, direct punch straight to the stalker's face, knocking him flat onto his back. The stalker's two friends are left completely stunned by the sudden violence, while Ji-yu panics, frantically grabbing Yoo-jun and asking why on earth he decided to hit the guy instead of just running away. But a smugly confident Yoo-jun simply grins, acknowledging that they are indeed in deep danger, but firmly declaring that they are absolutely not running away this time. A bewildered Ji-yu can only stare in disbelief, wondering what he means by us, and why on earth they are even fighting these guys in the first place. Seeing Yoo-jun's defiant stance, the two bullies chuckle mockingly, wondering if this kid has completely lost his mind, though their amusement quickly fades when they look down and realize their friend is actually crying in pure misery on the concrete floor. Cracking his knuckles and clenching his fist, Yoo-jun declares that they are done running away and that it is finally time to show these guys that they aren't idiots. Ji-yu watches him with a racing heart, nervously agreeing to stand by his side, even though she silently wonders to herself if this is actually a good idea. With the battle lines officially drawn, the two aggressive bullies charge forward in a rage, while Yoo-jun and Ji-yu raise their fists and step into a dual fighting stance, ready to take on the oncoming onslaught head-on. As the two aggressive bullies charge forward, one of them lunges toward Yoo-jun, yelling for him to come over. In a hilarious display of acting, our brave idiot suddenly pretends to be absolutely terrified, waving his hands frantically and begging them not to hit him while apologizing profusely. The display completely confuses his gray-shirted attacker, who pauses in sheer bewilderment, wondering if their friend Tae-sung is actually crazy for losing to such a pathetic wimp. But Yoojun's submissive act was merely a clever trap, as he suddenly unleashes a brutal, high-speed kick directly into the gray-shirted bully's midsection, leaving him groaning on the floor. Infuriated by the dirty trick, the remaining bully in the red track jacket immediately tackles Yoojun to the ground, pinning him flat on his back and preparing to throw a heavy punch. Acting on pure instinct, Yoojun grabs his attacker's incoming fist and unleashes his high-frequency vibration directly into the bully's hand. The intense vibration courses through the man's arm, sending him screaming in absolute agony as his face flushes bright red. Realizing his opponent is completely immobilized, Yoojun calls out to Jiyu, telling her that now is her golden opportunity. Understanding the plan instantly, a determined Jiyu charges forward with a raised fist, driving a powerful punch straight into the red jacket bully's face and knocking him out cold. With all three bullies now groveling on the concrete in complete defeat, the tearful stalker weakly accuses them of being cowards, weeping on the pavement as he pathetically wonders why they had to resort to such extreme violence when they were only trying to talk. Yoojun immediately fires back, pointing a dramatic finger and calling Taesung the real coward for bringing 3 people to corner just 2 of them, adding that the bullies clearly had no intention of just talking. Jiyu nods in agreement, confirming his words are absolutely true as the defeated red jacket bully weakly mutters a quiet insult from the ground. Without missing a beat, the victorious duo delivers a synchronized double stamp to the groaning bullies to shut them up for good. With the battle officially won, Yoojun grins and cheerfully decides that it is finally time to run away. A thoroughly bewildered Jiyu points out that he literally just said they weren't running away earlier, but the smug victor simply chuckles, explaining that running away is perfectly fine now because they already won the fight. Grabbing Jiyu's hand, Yoojun pulls her along as they sprint down the alleyway, laughing happily together while the defeated bullies weakly tell each other to get up because their targets are escaping. Meanwhile, back inside the quiet restaurant, Professor Hai-eun sits at the table, noticing her phone buzzing on the counter. Picking up the call, Hye-eun asks Yoojun why they aren't coming back inside, only for the young man to explain that they won't be returning to the party because the creepy stalker from earlier is still lurking around the area. Concerned, Hai-eun anxiously asks if they are both okay, but Yoojun proudly reassures her that they are completely fine and boasts that they successfully beat up the bullies once again. A relieved Hai-eun tells them to head back home safely and promises to see them on Monday, while the rest of the students listen to the conversation in stunned silence. Hanging up her phone, the professor sighs with pity, noting how glad she is that they are safe but feeling incredibly sorry for poor Yoojun, since he always seems to go through so much. Suddenly, her curious classmates bombard her with questions, eagerly asking where those 2 went, if something dramatic happened, and if the boy and girl are actually going out. Flustered by the sudden interrogation, Hai-eun quickly raises her glass, claiming she has no idea and suggesting they ask the pair on Monday if they are really that curious, prompting the disappointed students to clink their glasses together anyway. While the rest of the table continues to celebrate, a quiet Bowen sits alone, looking incredibly sad and dejected as she chugs her beer, clearly feeling left out. The scene then transitions to the dark night sky, moving down to a large building lit up with a neon gym sign, as a phone ringtone begins to chime inside one of the quiet rooms. Stepping inside the modern gym room, Yoojun looks around and awkwardly notes how remarkably spacious the place is, with a blushing Jiyu quietly agreeing as they stand in a highly tense, quiet room. Trying to break the heavy silence, Jiyu asks if he would like to grab a drink, which the young man happily accepts. Soon, they are settled in with a couple of cold cans of beer, potato chips, and dried squid on the table. Yoojun laughs heartily as he reminisces about the wild alleyway brawl, gesturing enthusiastically about how he landed those direct hits. While Jiyu takes a sip of her beer and giggles about their dramatic escape, the two share a warm, friendly gaze, thoroughly enjoying each other's company and laughing off the chaotic events of the night. As she watches him smile, Jiyu's eyes soften with a sudden wave of silence, finding our positive idiot to be surprisingly sussy in the warm light. Overcome with a sudden burst of courage, she quickly chugs down the rest of her beer, prompting a startled Yoojun to call out her name in concern as she slams the empty can flat onto the table. Turning her back to him, the bold girl slowly slides her white outer jacket off her shoulders to wear a gym outfit, softly calling out Yoojun's name as he lets out a thoroughly startled and confused hum. Jiyu turns back around, wearing a sleek black tank jacket, and confidently asks if he wants to start endurance training together. Staring at her in absolute shock, our flustered monkey's mind immediately visualizes a comical carrot and a baseball bat, representing an impending high-stakes conditioning duel before he dazedly realizes that he most certainly does. The scene opens in the quiet, dimly lit gym room, where Yoojun lies flat on his back, staring up at a bright ceiling light that is keeping him wide awake. His heart is pounding in his chest as he realizes he really should have turned off the lights before getting into the gym room. It has already been a highly tense 10 minutes since they both lay down for exercise, and our flustered protagonist can only wonder how much longer they are supposed to remain in this awkward silence. Glancing sideways, he wonders if his beautiful classmate has already started next to him. Looking over at Jiu, Yoojun notices her breathing softly, and he finds it hard to believe that she could actually fall asleep so easily with a trainer ready to train next to her. He concludes that the poor girl really has no idea of the effect she has on him. Suddenly, his inner thoughts take over, and the clueless monkey comically imagines himself with wolf ears and a tail, drooling as he wonders if this is her quiet invitation to start an intense conditioning session. Convinced that she must be acting and waiting for him to make the first move, his comical wolf persona growls with intense anticipation. Fortunately, Yoojun snaps back to reality, staring up at the ceiling light once more, and scolding himself for letting the alcohol get to his head. He decides it is best to stop his sussy imagination and simply try to go to sleep. However, his peaceful intentions are instantly shattered when he feels a sudden bag against his back. With her face burning, a highly flushed Jiu softly asks if he is actually planning to go to sleep without training her. This simple question triggers a highly dramatic vibration from Yoojun, leaving the poor idiot completely panicked and wondering what on earth he is supposed to do next. Suddenly, his inner mind conjures up two tiny spiritual guides, a devil representing his greed and an angel representing his conscience. Yoojun is completely bewildered by their sudden appearance, but the tiny angel immediately insults him, while the raging little devil screams at him to stop wasting time and just get to the endurance training. The aggressive devil continues to yell in absolute frustration, demanding to know what other possible reason they would have to be in this gym. To drive his point home, the angry little devil visualizes a classic scenario of a man promising to only hold hands at a gym, calling the promise absolute nonsense. He rants that a place like this is meant for a high-intensity endurance training session, demanding that Yoojun stop overthinking and do exactly what is expected of him. Sweating under the intense mental pressure, Yoojun completely gives in to his inner desires, nervously declaring to himself that he is going to go through with the training session. Looking for any last-minute guidance, Yoojun turns to his little conscience to see if he has anything to say to stop this madness. But the tiny angel remains hilariously indifferent, casually picking his nose before calmly advising him to at least not forget to use the proper-sized protective dumbbells for the upcoming workout. With that final piece of advice, the two tiny figures vanish back into Yoojun's mind in a puff of smoke. Gathering all his courage, Yoojun slowly turns around to face Jiu, softly calling her name. A surprised Jiu blinks up at him, and as Yoojun gently cradles her flushed cheek with his hand, he softly admits that he honestly thought she had already fallen asleep. The next thing he knows, he is sitting inside a cozy restaurant, staring down at a piping hot bowl of steaming soup. Across the table, a blushing Jiu nervously asks if this means they are actually going out now. A flustered Yoojun sheepishly confirms that they are, but Jiu hesitates. She brings up their previous encounter, struggling to find the right words to describe what happened after their initial contact. When Yoojun prompts her to clarify, she suddenly drops a bombshell, admitting that she might actually need to hold off on officially going out with him for a little while. This unexpected news completely panics our positive idiot, who desperately waves his hands and demands to know why. Jiu calmly explains her reasoning, pointing out that rushing into a partnership too quickly often leads to an even faster breakup. She plays with her hair and adds that she simply needs more time to seriously think about their relationship. However, her actions speak louder than her words. While delivering her serious speech, the playful girl slyly reaches her foot across the space beneath the table and begins playfully rubbing against Yoojun's bag. The sudden contact sends a jolt of high-frequency vibration straight through the poor monkey's leg, leaving him sweating bullets as he squeaks out his agreement. Satisfied with his submissive response, Jiu giggles and suggests that they should go out and have some fun once they finish eating their meal. After finishing their soup, the pair heads out for a classic shopping trip, arriving at a trendy clothing store packed with various outfits. Jiu steps out of the changing room to show off a stylish new look, and Yoojun is completely starstruck, staring at her with wide eyes and a red face. He enthusiastically gives her a double thumbs up, fully approving of her fashion choice. Next, they make their way to a lively arcade, where they spot a claw machine containing a pink teddy bear. Standing side by side, Yoojun takes control of the joystick with absolute focus and successfully snatches the prize, sending the toy tumbling into the chute. The victorious duo celebrates their monumental achievement, throwing their hands in the air in pure joy. However, their arcade victory is short-lived when they move over to a fighting game. Jiu finds herself locked in a highly competitive match, sweating and gritting her teeth in intense frustration before ultimately staring at a brutal game over screen. To make matters worse, her smug opponent pushes up his glasses with his middle finger, mockingly taunting her. Unable to handle the disrespect, Jiu snaps and delivers a devastating punch straight to the guy's jaw, sending him flying flat onto his back. A thoroughly panicked Yoo-jun can only watch in horror as the angry girl storms off, leading them to their next destination, a cozy karaoke room. Inside the room, the energetic outing continues as the two take turns singing their hearts out. While Ji-yoo sways gracefully to the music, Yoo-jun unleashes his intense vocal power, screaming into the microphone with hilarious desperation until he is completely drained of energy. An elderly employee soon brings in a tray of drinks, and after Yoo-jun politely accepts them, Ji-yoo takes a refreshing sip, while our dedicated singer continues his passionate vocal workout. As the music winds down, Ji-yoo looks at Yoo-jun with a soft, appreciative smile, leaning in close and catching him completely off guard. After sharing a quiet, lingering moment of mutual attraction, they finally head outside to wrap up their eventful night. Standing on the sidewalk as a taxi pulls up to take Ji-yoo home, Yoo-jun waves a warm goodbye. Ji-yoo waves back from the open door, flashing a beautiful, genuine smile as she promises to see him again tomorrow, leaving our lucky idiot thoroughly charmed. The scene opens in a neon-lit room where Yoo-jun is busy wearing his jacket, preparing to make a quick exit. Seeing him rush, the two trained women on the gym table call out to him, wondering why he is leaving so fast and pleading with him to train them endurance a little longer. Yoo-jun awkwardly explains that he simply cannot stay because he has to head to his part-time job. Surprised to hear he has a job, one of the women asks if he needs an allowance and kindly instructs him to take the brown envelope resting on the coffee table. Yoo-jun tries to politely decline, but curiosity gets the better of him. He peeks inside the envelope, and his jaw instantly drops in absolute shock as he finds a massive stack of high-value bills, leaving the greedy idiot gasping in disbelief. Standing by the door of the private room, Yoo-jun holds up the envelope in bewilderment while the women laugh at his reaction. They explain that the generous payment is actually a special thank you gift from the hospital director, Jang Ji-nam, for all of Yoo-jun's hard work. Sweating profusely, Yoo-jun realizes exactly who the money is from, and the women confirm his suspicion, adding that the wealthy grandfather is actually requesting another intense conditioning session. They playfully tease him, declaring that he is about to become incredibly rich. Deciding he has had more than enough of this bizarre setup, Yoo-jun immediately turns on his heel and bolts out the door, completely ignoring the women as they laugh and call him a cutie before deciding to wrap up their own day. Once safely outside, a delighted Yoo-jun walks down the street, chuckling greedily to himself with a massive grin plastered across his face. He greedily opens the envelope once more, drooling as he counts a whole $1,000 in cold, hard cash. He happily reflects that although the session for the director was incredibly exhausting, he can absolutely handle any amount of pain for this kind of money. Overjoyed, our positive idiot raises his hands to the sky, loudly thanking the director for his immense generosity. However, his celebration is abruptly cut short when he turns around and bumps directly into a quiet, short-haired woman wearing a gray jacket. Startled, Yoo-jun awkwardly offers a polite greeting, but the mysterious stranger simply responds with a cold, silent nod. Feeling incredibly awkward, Yoo-jun offers a quick bow and hastens his pace, silently wondering who on earth she is and why she won't say a single word to him. Muttering to himself that it is finally time to head to his actual job, Yoo-jun walks down the sidewalk, only to realize that the silent woman is walking directly behind him. He glances back in confusion, wondering why on earth she is following him. 5 minutes pass, and then another 5 minutes, but the mysterious tracker remains perfectly in step behind him. Sweating bullets and thoroughly panicked, the clueless monkey begins to spiral, wondering if he somehow did something wrong to her. As his heart begins to thump wildly, his mind takes a comically delusional turn, leading him to wonder if the attractive stranger might actually have a massive crush on him. Of course, the reality is that this is a classic, delusional response from a typical loser who clearly lives in a fantasy state. Lost in his silly thoughts, Yoo-jun stops in his tracks as he finally arrives outside the convenience store. He looks back over his shoulder to confront his silent stalker, only to find the street completely empty. Realizing she has mysteriously vanished into thin air, a thoroughly relieved Yoo-jun lets out a massive sigh, ready to start his shift. Pushing open the glass door as the entrance chime rings out, he cheerfully calls out for his boss. He steps inside, and his jaw drops as he is warmly greeted by his gorgeous boss, Mi-jong, who is standing by the counter looking absolutely stunning in a pink jacket, blushing with a beautiful smile. Entering the convenience store, Yoo-jun is greeted warmly by his beautiful boss, Mi-jong, who happily praises him for showing up so early and being incredibly diligent. Thrilled to see her, Yoo-jun stretches his arms wide and playfully declares how much he missed her, prompting Mi-jong to laughingly tell him to stop his sweet talk. She gently reminds him that she prefers he call her Nuna instead of boss, but before she can even finish her sentence, she suddenly freezes in absolute shock. Both of them turn around to see none other than the silent, track-suited woman from the street standing right inside the convenience store. To Yoo-jun's utter bewilderment, he quickly realizes that this intimidating stranger is actually Mi-jong's daughter. The situation grows even more chaotic as Yoo-jun recognizes the daughter as Se-yeon, the formidable teaching assistant from his university. Crossing her arms defensively, Seo-yeon demands to know what kind of partnership they have, prompting a highly panicked Mi-jong to desperately wave her hands and insist that it is nothing weird at all. Mi-jong stammers that Yoo-jun is just a part-timer and she only asked him to call her Nuna because they have gotten to know each other well. When Seo-yeon suspiciously questions their partnership, a sweat-drenched Mi-jong insists it is a perfectly normal manager-employee relationship, awkwardly joking that moms can be called Nuna too. Standing right between the two bickering women, our poor idiot silently prays to survive, completely blown away as he tries to wrap his head around how Se-yeon could be Mi-jong's daughter when Se-yeon is actually older than he is. The tension in the air is palpable as mother and daughter stand face to face in a silent, glaring match. Suddenly, both women step closer, leaving Yoo-jun trapped right in the middle, completely crushed between them as he helplessly notes how absolutely insane his life has become. Breaking the silence, Seo-yeon points a stern finger at Yoo-jun and glares at him with laser-like focus. A trembling Yoo-jun nervously calls out her name, but before she can interrogate him any further, Mi-jong quickly cuts in to defuse the situation. She desperately coaxes her daughter to head home, promising Yoo-jun that she will return shortly. As Mi-jong pushes her out the door, Seo-yeon looks back one last time to bluntly declare that she does not like Yoo-jun at all, leaving our terrified monkey standing alone, thoroughly shook by the family's impressive resemblance and breathing a massive sigh of relief. With the drama finally resolved, Yoo-jun gets straight to work, cleaning the counters and restocking the shelves. He eventually heads into the walk-in cooler to organize the beverages, grabbing a cold can of cherry Fanta to place on the shelf. But his peaceful routine is shattered once again when he hears a sudden movement behind him. Turning around in shock, his eyes widen as he finds Mi-jong standing inside the cold room, looking thoroughly flushed and out of breath. Before he can even ask why she is back inside the store, Mi-jong lunges forward and wraps her hands. A bewildered Yoo-jun blushes furiously, and as Mi-jong softly mutters that she told him to call her Nuna, he gently asks why she returned. Instead of answering, Mi-jong reaches down to his bag to start a conditioning session, leaving Yoo-jun gasping in shock as his beautiful boss suggestively proposes that they jump right into another round of high-intensity conditioning training. Inside the chilly walk-in cooler, Yoo-jun eagerly prepares to accept Mi-jong's sudden invitation for a conditioning training session. However, their highly anticipated session is suddenly interrupted by the sharp chime of the convenience store's entrance bell. A 32-year-old local regular named Lee Soo-hyun struts into the store wearing black clogs, a black army t-shirt, and green shorts. Unbeknownst to anyone, this particular customer is incredibly obsessed with Mi-jong, even carrying around expired tools and other useless junk just in case he ever gets lucky. Finding the front counter completely empty, Soo-hyun walks toward the back drink refrigerators, deeply disappointed and worrying that his beloved manager might have already gone home for the day. As he approaches the coolers, the delusional customer daydreams about confidently asking Mi-jong out on an outing to a nearby gym, smugly assuring himself that a man as highly attractive as he is stands a great chance. But as he reaches out to grab a yellow can of Fanta from the shelf, a sudden, heavy breathing sound from behind the glass doors catches his attention. Shaking uncontrollably in pure disbelief, Soo-hyun peers closely through the glass, only to be met with the shocking sight of a flushed and breathless Mi-jong. He can only stare in absolute horror, struggling to accept the painful reality unfolding right in front of his eyes. Soo-hyun's mind immediately fractures as he visualizes a tragic fantasy of multiple Mi-jongs hovering over him, crying tears of regret. Realizing his dreams are completely shattered, the heartbroken man lets out a tearful curse and walks out of the store, officially losing all hope in his 145th potential partner. Meanwhile, back inside the walk-in cooler, a thoroughly exhausted Yoo-jun hears the door chime ring once again, prompting him to nervously point out to his boss that someone else has just entered the store. But a deeply flushed Mi-jong is completely focused on their conditioning session, urging him not to stop his high-intensity conditioning workout. Unfortunately for the busy pair, another customer has indeed entered, and it is none other than Yoo-jun's extremely shy classmate, Bowen. Peering through the glass of the beverage refrigerator, Bowen's eyes widen in absolute, jaw-dropped horror as she catches the two mid-workout. Sweating bullets, a stunned Yoo-jun stands completely frozen on the other side of the glass, realizing they have been caught red-handed in the middle of their full-body training sesh. Unaware of their spectator, a completely dazed Mi-jong happily gasps that Yoo-jun is the absolute best partner she has ever trained with. Inside the cold walk-in cooler, Yoojun is still reeling from the sudden realization that their shy classmate Bone was staring right at them. But before he can even process the awkwardness, a loud voice from the main store pierces through the air, demanding to have their order taken immediately. Panicking, the sweat-drenched monkey quickly tells Mi-jong that he will handle the customer first and rushes out of the cooler, calling out that he will be there in just a moment. Yoojun runs straight to the checkout counter, where he finds a man in a gray suit jacket waiting to buy a pack of cigarettes. After Yoojun scans the items and rings up the price, the customer casually asks if the manager of the store is a woman named Choi Mi-jong. A highly alert Yoojun confirms her identity and asks what the matter is, only for the smug customer to smirk, noting that Mi-jong indeed still works here. The man starts muttering cryptically about the building, but when Yoojun asks for clarification, the stranger quickly waves it off, claiming they are merely acquaintances. However, his suspicious behavior only increases when he boldly asks Yoojun to hand over Mi-jong's phone number, claiming his own phone is broken, so he cannot call her directly. Highly suspicious of the guy's casual tone, Yoojun bluntly refuses to help, firmly stating that he cannot comply with giving out personal customer information. When the annoyed man insists that they are acquaintances, a fiercely protective Yoojun stands his ground like a guard cat, flatly telling him to leave. As the argument heats up, Yoojun threatens to call the police if the man keeps up his aggressive behavior. Just then, Mi-jong herself walks out of the back room, leaving the customer gasping in shock as Yoojun turns around to see what is happening. The smug stranger's grin returns as he remarks that it has indeed been a long time, casually addressing Mi-jong as his dear. Yoojun is left completely flustered by the greeting, but Mi-jong does not hesitate for a single second. Lunging forward with immense fury, she delivers a brutal, high-speed slap right across the man's face. The confrontation ends quickly, and after a brief hesitation, the two step outside to settle their personal matters. Yoojun can only watch through the glass window as they walk away, munching comically on some snacks and admitting to himself that even though it is Mi-jong's personal business, that arrogant prick seriously ticks him off. Later that night, Yoojun is fast asleep in his bed when a sudden, persistent knocking at his apartment door wakes him up. Rubbing his eyes in confusion, the dazed boy gets up and opens the door, only to find a deeply flushed and downcast Mi-jong standing in the quiet hallway. Yoojun is completely caught off guard, asking what could possibly bring her here so late. But before the clueless monkey can even finish his sentence, a highly emotional Mi-jong lunges forward and shows him a fitness conditioning trick. Unfortunately, their desperate trick is hilariously clumsy, and they quickly pull apart in agonizing pain after accidentally clashing their bags together, leaving both of them blushing and awkwardly apologizing to each other. Sitting on the floor of Yoojun's apartment over a bottle of soju, a highly worried Mi-jong begins to pour her heart out, explaining the real reason she sought him out so late. Yoojun listens intently as she reveals that the man from earlier was actually her ex-partner, who has suddenly returned and demanded that they get remarried. Up until now, Mi-jong had only looked at her ex-partner with absolute disgust and hatred for his past betrayal. However, as the man wept bitterly and deeply apologized for being a pathetic partner and a lousy father, Mi-jong couldn't help but feel her resolve begin to shake. The ex-partner desperately begged for one last opportunity to protect his family and be a proper father again, leaving a highly conflicted Mi-jong completely overwhelmed by the emotional storm. The emotional conversation continues as Yoojun reflects on the ex-partner's desperate plea to reunite and walk the same path together as a family just one more time. Looking down at Mi-jong, the concerned young man gently asks if she actually plans to see that person again. A deeply conflicted Mi-jong looks down and hugs her knees, admitting that she is utterly torn about whether she can truly trust him again, fearing the immense pain of getting hurt all over again. Overwhelmed by her deep anxieties, she gently rests her head against Yoojun's bag, while our understanding protagonist silently acknowledges that he can never truly comprehend the full depth of the painful wounds she carries. Hoping to comfort her, Yoojun gently reaches out to her, explaining that he completely understands how terrifying and difficult it must be to trust someone again after being betrayed. He softly encourages her to look deep into her own emotions to find her most honest answer, promising that he will always support and cheer her on no matter what she decides. Touched by his incredibly sweet words, Mi-jong gazes up at him with teary, grateful eyes, before her mood suddenly shifts. Releasing a sudden burst of playful energy, the sussy woman forcefully throws Yoojun to the fridge, calling him an absolute cutie while a panicked Yoojun desperately begs his boss to wait and stay still. But Mi-jong has absolutely no intention of stopping, and the flushed, sweat-drenched woman immediately initiates an incredibly powered full-body training sesh. Lying flat on his back, Yoojun can only gasp out her name as they dive headfirst into their high-intensity conditioning session. As Mi-jong pushes her body to the absolute limit during their intense endurance training, a flustered Yoo-jun comically accuses her of having planned this entire workout session from the very beginning. Amidst a flurry of breathless sighs and high-frequency stimulation, the energetic duo successfully completes another legendary round of their muscle-building routine. Meanwhile, the scene abruptly transitions back to the awkward aftermath inside the walk-in cooler, where both Bowen and Yoo-jun are left staring at each other in complete, wide-eyed silence as they struggle to process the absolute chaos of being caught. Utterly mortified by what she has just seen, a bright red Bowen bolts straight out of the convenience store, running past the dejected customer who is still sitting curled up on the pavement outside. Sprinting down the street, she quickly ducks into a nearby building hallway, leaning against the door as she pants heavily. Her face is completely flushed, and her entire body trembles in sheer disbelief as she clenches her hands to her chest, desperately trying to wrap her mind around the wild, high-intensity training session she just witnessed inside the cooler. The narrative begins inside a bizarre, pink-hued dreamscape where a comically tiny Yoo-jun is lounging on a massive, soft landscape, happily concluding that he has finally found absolute paradise. In his delightful dream, a conditioning session is taking place, filled with comically loud sounds of hard work. However, his peaceful slumber is abruptly shattered when he wakes up with a start, realizing that the incredibly loud noises are actually coming from directly outside his room. Thoroughly annoyed, the poor idiot yells for whoever is outside to shut up, rubbing his eyes in confusion as he slides open his balcony door to investigate who on earth is making such a massive racket so early in the morning. Peering down into the narrow alleyway below, Yoo-jun spots Mi-jong's ex-partner, pacing back and forth, swearing loudly and smoking a cigarette. Yoo-jun is deeply disgusted by the man's rude behavior, wondering how a sweet woman like Mi-jong could have ever ended up marrying such an obnoxious prick who has the audacity to smoke right outside someone else's house. As he listens closer, he hears the ex-partner yelling on his phone about getting some money, leaving our protagonist thoroughly confused. But before he can investigate any further, a sudden splash of liquid lands directly on his face. Yoo-jun gasps and looks up to spot his university teaching assistant, Seo-yeon, looking out from her balcony above. Realizing she accidentally spit on him, a highly flustered Seo-yeon quickly apologizes. Wiping his face in disgust, Yoo-jun mutters that this is the first time he has ever been spit on, but his bad mood instantly vanishes when his phone buzzes with a warm text from Mi-jong, inviting him over for a delicious breakfast of homemade kimchi stew. Overjoyed by the sweet invitation, the happy monkey dashes out of his room and heads straight over to her apartment. Soon, Yoo-jun is seated at the dining table, stuffing his face with the warm stew and enthusiastically declaring it to be one of the absolute best meals he has ever eaten in his entire life. A blushing Mi-jong laughs happily, telling him to eat as much as he wants, before turning to ask her daughter, Seo-yeon, if the food is to her liking as well. Seo-yeon offers a warm smile, replying that the stew tastes even better because her mother made it. Mi-jong is delighted by their appreciation, happily promising to cook the meal for them again next time. However, their cozy family moment is suddenly shattered by a loud, demanding knock at the front door. Mi-jong's warm smile instantly vanishes, replaced by a look of sheer dread as her ex-partner's voice echoes from the hallway, demanding that she open the door so they can talk. Steeling herself, Mi-jong slowly walks over and opens the door to find him standing outside. She glares at him coldly, demanding to know why he had the audacity to come to her home. The anxious man explains that after reading her text message, he simply couldn't sit still and felt they desperately needed to talk things through. Letting out a tired, heavy sigh, Mi-jong asks if he has eaten yet, and when he admits that he hasn't, she reluctantly invites him inside, strictly warning him that they are only going to eat and that she has absolutely no desire to talk. Entering the dining room, the ex-partner is visibly startled to find both his daughter and Yoo-jun sitting at the table. He offers a hesitant greeting to Seo-yeon, asking if she has been well, and then suspiciously eyes Yoo-jun, questioning if the young man is the part-timer. Mi-jong quickly cuts in, telling him to sit down so she can bring him a plate while ordering everyone to remain completely quiet. An incredibly heavy, awkward silence settles over the table as Mi-jong works in the kitchen. Unable to bear the tense atmosphere, Seo-yeon suddenly stands up from the table, politely thanking her mother for the food and preparing to leave. Her father awkwardly tries to make conversation, but a cold Seo-yeon completely ignores him. Even though Mi-jong worriedly points out that there is plenty of food left, Seo-yeon simply states that she is full and walks out of the room, leaving her father sitting in uncomfortable silence while a clueless Yoo-jun continues to quietly chew his food. The tense breakfast scene takes a sudden turn when a flustered Mi-jong suggests that Yoo-jun and her daughter should head out to a local cafe together explaining that she wants to have this highly private conversation with her ex-partner entirely alone. Yoo-jun quickly agrees, and Seo-yeon stands up to command our positive idiot to follow her. Yoo-jun is briefly confused, questioning if he is really supposed to tag along instead of just letting her go alone, but Seo-yeon firmly leads the way out. Walking side by side down the street under a beautifully bright, sunny sky, a highly nervous Seo-yeon sweats quietly, while a cheerful Yoo-jun breaks the silence by pleasantly remarking on how wonderful the weather is, prompting an awkward, stuttered agreement from his companion. Deciding to address the elephant in the room, Yoo-jun looks over at Seo-yeon and brings up the bizarre incident from earlier that morning. When a confused Seo-yeon asks what about it, the young man directly asks why on earth she decided to spit at him from her window. Looking deeply embarrassed and blushing heavily, Seo-yeon offers a sincere apology, before admitting that her actual target was her mother's ex-partner. A bewildered Yoo-jun demands to know why she would do such a gross thing, prompting Seo-yeon to explain that she wanted to make the awful man feel like garbage, because she absolutely despises him. Scratching his head, Yoo-jun's sweat drops, pointing out that it certainly didn't make the husband feel bad, and asking why the projectile ended up hitting him instead. A highly sheepish Seo-yeon desperately defends herself, explaining that the wind must have suddenly blown the spit in his direction, profusely swearing that she never intended to hit him. Amused by her hilarious excuse, Yoo-jun easily laughs it off, assuring her that it is perfectly fine. Catching her off guard with his sweet concern, he gently checks to see if she is doing all right. Seo-yeon blushes and quietly states that she is fine, explaining that she is simply trying her best to respect her mother's wishes. But their cozy conversation is cut short when Seo-yeon suddenly pats her pockets and realizes with a gasp that she has completely forgotten her wallet. When Yoo-jun asks if they should head back, Seo-yeon stands frozen in silence, prompting him to ask if she has any cash or mobile payment options on her phone. Laughing awkwardly, the clueless girl screams that she has never even heard of such advanced technology, leaving them with no choice but to head straight back to the apartment building. Yoo-jun suggests waiting out front, but Seo-yeon insists that he should head up to grab his wallet too so they can meet on the first floor. Arriving back at the apartment, Seo-yeon pushes open her front door and calls out for her mother, intending to borrow some cash. But as she steps inside, she suddenly freezes in absolute shock as a muffled gasp echoes from the kitchen. Peering into the dining room, Seo-yeon's jaw drops in pure horror as she spots her mother flat against the fridge. With food knocked all over the floor, the aggressive ex-partner is actively trying to force Mi-jong into an unwanted conditioning session while she desperately tries to push him away. Seeing her mother being assaulted, a wave of absolute, cold fury washes over Seo-yeon, her eyebrows twitching and veins bulging on her forehead in unbridled rage. Unleashing a terrifying scream, the powerful athletic senior charges forward like a raging bull, clenching her fist and driving a devastating, high-speed punch straight into her father's face as he turns around in utter shock. Seo-yeon's powerful punch connects violently with her father's face, but the ruthless ex-partner quickly recovers and retaliates with an aggressive slap across his daughter's cheek. The brutal strike sends the poor girl crashing to the floor, prompting a horrified Mi-jong to scream out in terror. Desperate to protect her daughter, Mi-jong lunges at her ex-partner, furiously questioning if he has completely lost his mind, but the toxic man only snarls back, demanding to know what kind of crazy person would suddenly start swinging at him. Showing absolutely no mercy, the abusive father aggressively shoves Mi-jong away, determined to beat some sense into his daughter. Losing all control, the furious father grabs Seo-yeon brutally by her hair, ignoring her painful screams of agony. He raises his fist to strike her, but a tearful Mi-jong desperately begs him to stop. As Seo-yeon struggles to break free, a terrified Mi-jong realizes she has to take drastic action. Spotting a large kitchen knife resting on the counter, her trembling hand tightly grips the handle. Desperately brandishing the blade, she tearfully warns the abusive prick to stay back, catching the startled ex-partner completely off guard. But before the situation can escalate any further, a sudden, powerful force crashes into the room. Leaping through the air, Yoo-jun delivers a devastating flying kick straight into the ex-partner's face, knocking the abusive man flat onto his back. Standing protectively in front of them, our brave protagonist urges Mi-jong to take her daughter and escape immediately. When Mi-jong hesitates, Yoo-jun firmly commands her to call the police right now. Realizing they need to move fast, Mi-jong quickly helps her injured daughter up, and they both run out of the apartment to seek help. Furious at their escape, the bleeding ex-partner pushes himself up from the floor, screaming after them, but Yoo-jun steps in to block his path, calmly telling the old man to relax. Enraged by the interference, the toxic father declares that the part-timer is dead meat as well, charging forward with a heavy punch. Acting on pure instinct, Yoo-jun swiftly dodges the blow and counters with a powerful strike to the man's jaw, sending him stumbling back. The stubborn father swings a wild counterpunch, but our quick-witted monkey easily evades the attack, landing another solid punch and telling the man to calm down. Clutching his bleeding face in pain, the battered ex-partner is forced to reluctantly acknowledge the young kid's formidable combat skills, admitting to himself that the part-timer actually fights remarkably well. As Yoo-jun forcefully tells him to calm down, the enraged ex-partner demands that the young man get out of his way. Spotting the fallen kitchen knife on the floor, the desperate man immediately lunges forward to grab it. A panicked Yoo-jun tries to interject, but it is too late, as the furious father firmly grips the weapon and growls that he is truly going to kill him. Holding the blade tightly at his side with a shaking, murderous grip, he ignores Yoo-jun's desperate pleas to calm down, screaming at him to get lost before charging forward to deliver a lethal strike. The maniacal father slashes downward with the blade, forcing a terrified Yoo-jun to catch his wrist with both hands to prevent the impact. In a comically desperate struggle, Yoo-jun screams at the old man to chill out, pointing out that his crazy attack could literally kill him, but the man only rages back, declaring that he wants him to die. Realizing he is dealing with a complete madman, Yoo-jun decides that running away is not an option, and he must find a way to instantly de-escalate the situation. Acting on pure instinct, Yoo-jun reaches down with one hand and firmly grips the ex-partner's mana center. The completely stunned father gasps in agonizing shock, demanding to know what on earth the young part-timer is doing, while a calm Yoo-jun politely asks him to relax. Without losing a single second, Yoo-jun activates his natural high-frequency vibration directly onto the man's mana center. The overwhelming crackling vibration courses through the ex-partner's body, instantly neutralizing his rage and leaving him to weakly plead for Yoo-jun to stop as he lets out a final, breathless scream of complete defeat. With the threat officially resolved, the scene transitions to the morning news broadcast, where an anchor reports on a terrifying stabbing incident in the local neighborhood. The report explains that the suspect, Mr. Han, was facing severe gambling debts and had cornered his ex-wife in a desperate attempt to resolve his financial issues. However, thanks to the incredibly swift and heroic intervention of a young resident named Mr. Kang, the victim was able to escape completely unharmed. The newscast shows police escorting the handcuffed suspect away with his head covered, wishing a swift recovery to the injured parties. The scene then shifts to the quiet room of a local hospital, where the doctor is wrapping up emergency treatment on Seo-yeon's deeply gashed face. The doctor reassures her that the deep cuts have been properly treated and won't leave any permanent scarring, advising her to avoid overexertion for a few days and apply the prescribed medicine. A polite Seo-yeon offers her gratitude, but the moment the doctor leaves, Mi-jong bursts into tears at her bedside. Looking at her daughter's heavily bandaged face, the grieving mother weeps bitterly, profusely apologizing for putting her through such a terrifying ordeal. A sweet Seo-yeon tries to comfort her mother with a gentle smile, insisting that she is the one who should have stopped him, but Mi-jong only clutches her hands in deep guilt, crying that this terrible tragedy only happened because she simply wasn't strong enough. Back in the quiet hospital room, Seo-yeon gently comforts her weeping mother, questioning why she continues to blame herself when she had actively tried her absolute best to protect her. Smiling warmly through her bandages, the sweet daughter points out that Mi-jong was going through so much pain herself, yet she never once stopped worrying about her daughter's well-being. Seo-yeon tenderly tells her mother that to her, Mi-jong is the strongest mom in the entire world. She acknowledges that while her mother might be a bit clumsy and struggle to express her feelings, she always knows that Mi-jong's thoughts are filled with feelings for her. Urging her to stop crying, Seo-yeon gently cradles her mother's teary face, assuring her that simply having her by her side is more than enough to give her all the strength she needs to face the future together. Deeply touched, Mi-jong tearfully smiles, warmly thanking her beloved daughter for her beautiful words. Meanwhile, the scene transitions to the local police station, where Yoo-jun is passionately slamming his hands on a desk in self-defense. The desk officer notes that because the attacker got remarkably roughed up during the brawl, it is quite difficult to officially label the incident as self-defense. An annoyed Yoo-jun immediately shoots back, questioning if the officer expected him to just stand there and let himself get stabbed by a madman wielding a giant kitchen knife. The officer concedes his point but remains highly skeptical, asking why on earth the attacker ended up wetting himself during the struggle. Sweating profusely, a guilty Yoo-jun awkwardly stammers that he has absolutely no idea how that could have happened, desperately keeping the secret of his high-frequency crotch therapy to himself. Satisfied enough with the explanation, the officer wraps up his paperwork, dryly advising the young man to file a report before throwing punches next time. Yoo-jun sheepishly agrees and politely excuses himself, thanking the officer for his time before walking out of the office. Stepping into the station hallway, Yoo-jun lets out a massive, exhausted sigh of relief, glad to have finally concluded the stressful ordeal. However, his peaceful exit is suddenly interrupted when his eyes snap open in shock as he spots two police officers escorting the handcuffed ex-partner down the corridor. A highly tense silence settles over the hallway as Yoo-jun and the battered man lock eyes. But our sussy monkey cannot resist the golden opportunity for a prank. Lunging forward with a comically aggressive shout, Yoo-jun pretends to launch another attack, sending the terrified ex-partner jumping back in absolute, shivering panic. Seeing the man's pathetic reaction, Yoo-jun immediately bursts into a roaring fit of laughter, pointing a mocking finger at the trembling coward, while the amused officers chuckle in the background. Thoroughly satisfied with his hilarious victory, the cheerful young man whistles a happy tune and skips right out of the police station doors, leaving the disgraced husband to be escorted away. After a long and stressful day, a car finally pulls up to the curb, dropping off a thoroughly exhausted Yoo-jun. Stepping out onto the pavement, the young man stretches his aching back, complaining about how incredibly tired he is and wishing for nothing more than to head straight home and rest. He reflects on how harsh the police officers were during his questioning, silently grumbling that dealing with them was far more exhausting than the actual physical brawl. He stops in his tracks, reminding himself that his opponent was hardly a decent person anyway, before looking up toward Mi-jong's apartment building. Noticing a bright light shining from her high-floor window, Yoo-jun wonders if his beautiful boss has managed to get back home safely. He decides to walk up and check on her, but as he approaches the apartment entrance, his eyes widen in surprise. To his bewilderment, he finds the front door standing slightly ajar, prompting him to cautiously step inside, while softly calling out for her. As he enters the room, he spots Mi-jong kneeling on the kitchen floor, bent over in a state of distress. It turns out the poor woman had accidentally shattered a ceramic bowl, spilling soup all over the floor, and in her distracted state, she managed to cut her finger on one of the sharp, broken pieces. Yoo-jun is quite surprised to hear his usually polite boss swear softly under her breath from the sudden sting. Before she can even realize she is not alone, Yoo-jun steps closer, causing the startled woman to let out a loud scream of pure terror as she realizes someone is standing right behind her. A highly flustered Mi-jong demands to know why on earth he had to appear out of nowhere and scare her like that, anxiously questioning when he arrived and how long he had been watching. A deeply apologetic Yoo-jun explains that he just got there a moment ago and only wanted to slip in quietly to avoid disturbing her. Noticing the blood on her hand, the caring young man insists on treating her cut immediately, brushing aside her polite hesitations and quickly getting to work. Within moments, Yoo-jun neatly wraps her injured finger in a cute pink bandage and diligently cleans up the entire messy kitchen, leaving the floor and table sparkling clean. Settling down at the table, our thirsty protagonist greedily chugs a giant glass of cold barley tea, letting out a satisfied sigh as he praises how incredibly refreshing it tastes. Mi-jong smiles warmly, thanking him for taking care of the cleanup so quickly. Hoping to ease her mind, Yoo-jun gently asks about her daughter Seo-yeon's condition. Mi-jong explains that Seo-yeon is currently hospitalized, so the doctors can monitor her for a day, but she reassures him that her daughter is going to be fine. She then turns the concern back on him, asking if Yoo-jun is holding up okay after his stressful encounter with the police. Caught off guard by her sweet concern, Yoo-jun can only look on as Mi-jong's composure suddenly crumbles. The heavy emotional burden of the day finally catches up to her, and tears begin to stream down her flushed face as she trembles in silent sorrow. Seeing his boss break down, Yoo-jun quickly slides a tissue box across the table, gently advising her to take a deep breath and relax because the nightmare is finally over. He reminds her that her abusive ex-partner has been officially arrested, meaning he will never be able to harass their family again. Mi-jong grabs a tissue and loudly blows her nose, trying to find her voice. She admits that she isn't actually scared of the man anymore, but she is simply overwhelmed by an intense wave of guilt and sadness, weeping bitterly over how much her beloved daughter had to suffer both mentally and physically because of her own mistakes. Hoping to comfort her, Yoo-jun gently reaches across the table and clasps her trembling hands on his own. He softly tells her not to be so sad, offering a rather bizarre but lighthearted comparison by explaining that sadness is a lot like snot. A thoroughly bewildered Mi-jong can only sniffle in confusion as our goofy protagonist continues his unique logic. Yoo-jun explains that even if someone tries to forcefully block their emotions, the tears are eventually going to flow anyway, and holding it all inside only makes a person feel incredibly uncomfortable and unsettled. He points out that while it may feel like the crying will never stop, the sorrow eventually runs its course and comes to an end. Handing her another tissue, Yoo-jun delivers a sweet promise, explaining that just like a simple tissue is always there to wipe away tears and ease someone's sorrow, He will always remain right by her side to support her through whatever comes next. Following his highly dramatic tissue box speech, Yoo-jun strikes a theatrical pose, leaving Mi-jung completely speechless as she blinks in utter bewilderment. However, the bizarre analogy works wonders, and the tense atmosphere instantly breaks as Mi-jung bursts into a warm fit of laughter, happily thanking the clumsy monkey for making her smile. Smiling brightly, Mi-jung admits that even if his speech wasn't particularly funny, simply seeing his sincere effort to comfort her makes her feel so much better. A slightly flustered Yoo-jun mutters that he was actually trying to be funny, but he quickly reassures her that what really matters is how she feels, celebrating that she is finally feeling much more relaxed. Mi-jung agrees, softly noting that having someone reliable by her side truly makes a world of difference, prompting our positive idiot to laugh happily. Her thoughts quickly drift to her daughter, and Mi-jung wonders how lonely poor Se-yeon must feel sitting all alone in her hospital room, wishing that someone could be there to keep her company as well. Yoo-jun gently tells her not to worry, reminding his boss that the hospital has excellent nurses watching over her 24 hours a day, and reassures her that Se-yeon is incredibly strong and will easily overcome this ordeal. Deeply touched by his kind words, Mi-jung suggests that they should all head out to grab a delicious celebratory meal together the moment her daughter is finally discharged, a proposal that Yoo-jun happily agrees to with a bright grin. With their warm conversation wrapping up, Mi-jung suddenly stands up from the table, prompting Yoo-jun to watch her in mild curiosity. The scene then transitions to the quiet night sky, moving down to the exterior of the hospital where Se-yeon is resting. Inside her quiet room, the injured teaching assistant lies on her side, sighing heavily to herself about how incredibly bored she is. Rolling onto her stomach to play with her smartphone, Se-yeon wonders what her mother is currently doing and if she managed to eat a proper dinner, though she hesitates to call because she doesn't want her mother to worry over nothing. As she stares at her screen, her mind quickly drifts back to Yoo-jun, and she anxiously wonders if the young part-timer is holding up all right or if he got hurt during the crazy brawl. A brief flashback of the dramatic rescue plays in her head, reminding her of the moment Yoo-jun charged in with a heroic flying kick to save her from her abusive father. Blushing furiously, the sweet girl finds herself quietly admitting that he actually looked pretty cool in that moment, though she quickly shakes her head in embarrassment, burying her face in her hands and scolding herself for letting such silly thoughts get to her head. Unable to satisfy her curiosity, Se-yeon wonders if the young man has an active social media page, quickly pulling up the university student records to find his phone number so she can search for his profile. She lets out a triumphant gasp as she successfully locates his Instagram account, and after a brief moment of hesitation where she worries that sending a sudden direct message might be a bit too forward, she gathers all her courage and firmly taps the send button. Clasping her phone tightly as her heart beats rapidly against her chest, the highly anxious girl lies on her stomach and swings her feet in anticipation, eagerly awaiting his response. 20 long minutes pass by, but there is still absolutely no reply from Yoo-jun's end. A highly disappointed Se-yeon stares blankly at her silent screen, sweating quietly as she wonders if the young man has already fallen asleep, despite it only being 8 o'clock in the evening. Little does the clueless teaching assistant know, Yoo-jun is currently far too occupied to check his social media notifications. Back at the apartment, Yoo-jun and Mi-jung have successfully transitioned into a fitness conditioning session. Locked in an intense full-body training sesh, eagerly complying, our energetic protagonist pushes his physical stamina to the absolute limit, conducting a powerful hand endurance and strength workout that leaves both of them completely dazed. Meanwhile, back in her quiet hospital room, Se-yeon lets out a quiet, disappointed sigh, completely unaware of the endurance training session currently taking place back home. Convinced that Yoo-jun must already be fast asleep, Se-yeon reluctantly concludes that she should probably head to bed as well. She comforts herself with the reassuring thought that she will at least get to enjoy a delicious, warm meal with her mother the following day. Staring down at her glowing phone screen one last time, the sleepy monkey lets out a quiet, dejected sigh. Feeling her eyelids grow heavy from the sheer exhaustion of the day's dramatic events, she gently rests her head on her crossed arms, finally letting her worries fade away. While Se-yeon is peacefully sleeping in her hospital bed, the situation back in Yoo-jun's apartment building is anything but quiet. Downstairs, his shy classmate Boen is currently enduring absolute torture, sweating and clenching her teeth in pure misery. Wrapped in her yellow hooded blanket, the poor girl desperately pleads in her head for the partners upstairs to perform their conditioning session a bit quieter, wishing they would show some consideration for the neighbors living directly below them. Unfortunately, her silent prayers are completely ignored, as loud, breathless groans of intense exertion continue to echo through her ceiling, leaving her groaning in utter frustration and wrapping her blanket tighter around her face. Unable to bear the noisy onslaught any longer, the frustrated neighbor finally snaps. Grabbing a mop from the corner, Bone stands tall in her carrot-patterned pajamas and aggressively bangs the handle against her ceiling, shouting for the noisy partners upstairs to please conduct their high-intensity training sessions quietly so she can finally get some sleep. Banging the handle one last time, she pauses and listens intently, hoping her message was successfully received. Just as she begins to celebrate the sudden quiet, her peace is instantly shattered when an even louder, breathless cry of hard work vibrates through the floorboards. Bone's eyes widen in pure, unbridled rage as she realizes these persistent freaks have absolutely no intention of slowing down. Losing all of her remaining patience, she repeatedly slams the mop handle against the ceiling, screaming at the top of her lungs for the loud partners to shut up and keep their intense endurance workouts down. Little does she know, the partners above are indeed taking her feedback to heart. High above her ceiling, a thoroughly exhausted Mi-jung and a sweat-drenched Yu-jun are breathing heavily after completing a particularly grueling round of their full-body training sesh. Yu-jun suddenly freezes, hearing the aggressive banging sound vibrating from the floor below. Mi-jung, completely flushed and leaning breathlessly against the wall, weakly tells Yu-jun to wait and suggests they should take a well-deserved break before starting their next round of conditioning. Back downstairs, a relieved Bone lets out a sigh of triumph, celebrating the fact that it has finally gone quiet and she can finally get some sleep. Settling cozily under her covers, she smiles happily, muttering to herself about how much she hates being forced to listen to other people's noisy endurance training. But just as her eyes begin to close, another loud, sudden groan of exertion echoes from above. This final interruption officially breaks the poor girl's sanity. Sporting a dark, terrifying grin, she flings her blanket aside and marches out of her bedroom, determined to handle this issue face to face. Bone storms up the stairs and stands directly outside the noisy apartment, aggressively pounding on the metal door. She loudly calls out, politely but firmly demanding that they keep their noise down, only to be cut off when a flustered voice from inside tells her to wait just a single moment. Standing alone in the quiet hallway, Bowen suddenly feels a wave of intense regret, nervously wondering if she should have just endured the noise, or if her direct confrontation was actually far too aggressive. Her anxious thoughts are abruptly cut short by the sharp click of the door lock as it slowly swings open. A voice asks what the matter is, and Bowen gasps in absolute, jaw-dropped horror as she looks up to see the tenant standing before her. There stands a sweat-drenched Yu-jun, steam actively rising from his hot skin, with only a single white jacket wrapped around his body. Yu-jun blinks in surprise, recognizing his classmate and wondering what on earth Bowen is doing outside his door. Bowen's face turns a brilliant, burning shade of crimson, her eyes bulging in pure terror as she processes the shocking realization that her quiet classmate is the exact culprit behind the loud and chaotic full-body training sessions upstairs. A few days pass, and a bright, clear, sunny sky welcomes a brand new day at the university campus. Outside the main gates of Yunhei University, a large red transport bus sits parked, ready to take the students on their next trip. Yu-jun and Bowen are standing side by side near the bus door, engulfed in an incredibly heavy, tense silence as they both sweat drop awkwardly. Desperate to break the ice, Yu-jun tentatively asks Bowen if she arrived early, and Bowen stammers a quiet confirmation before asking if he managed to pack all of his belongings, which our positive protagonist cheerfully confirms. Unfortunately, their brief conversation instantly lapses back into another painful round of quiet silence. Yu-jun tries one more time to ease the tension, pleasantly remarking on how wonderful the weather is today. A highly nervous Bowen stutters her agreement, though in her head, the poor girl is actively crying over how unbelievably awkward things have become between them since she caught him in full jacket the other night. Before they can suffer through any more tense silence, Professor Hyun suddenly rounds the corner, alongside Ji-yu and a few other classmates, cheerfully noting that both Yu-jun and Bowen managed to arrive early. Yu-jun politely asks if the group had to wait very long, to which the professor replies that it wasn't long at all, encouraging everyone to quickly board the vehicle. Stepping inside, Yu-jun is delighted to find a mostly empty cabin, happily realizing that there are plenty of open seats and that they will each be able to sit in their own spacious rows. However, his peaceful plans are also instantly shattered when a highly possessive Ji-yu roughly grabs him from behind. Before the poor kid can even react, a stampede of eager classmates led by Bone and the others forcefully pushes past him, sending our clumsy protagonist flying backward and knocking the poor idiot flat on his back across the seats. Yu-jun is left groaning on the floor with a massive, painful bump swelling on his forehead, while the professor calmly instructs the group to quickly sit down. Rubbing his injured head, Yu-jun looks up to find Ji-yu sitting right next to him. He nervously suggests that there are plenty of open seats in the spacious back rows, but the proud blonde girl simply pouts, asking if he really doesn't want her sitting next to him. Realizing he is cornered, the sheepish young man quickly backtracks, admitting that he certainly does. As the bus speeds down the open highway, a tired Yoojun falls fast asleep, drooling on his shoulder, while Ji-yu watches him with a smug, fox-like expression. Seizing her opportunity while he is deep in slumber, a sly Ji-yu slowly reaches her hand out to gently touch his hand. However, her sudden contact immediately triggers Yoojun's high-frequency vibration. An intense vibration courses straight through the sleeping boy's body, causing him to let out a loud, agonizing scream of pure panic. Right at that moment, the group is instructed to wake up because they have finally arrived at their destination, prompting a yawning classmate to complain about how much their rear end hurts from the long ride. The bus pulls up outside a massive white facility with a blue sign identifying it as the Hanmam Retreat Center, leaving the students to wonder if they are actually here for a school retreat. Stepping off the bus into the fresh air, Yoojun is pleasantly surprised by how nice and well-designed the facility looks, while Ji-yu stands right behind him, in a highly dazed state. However, Yoojun's attention is quickly stolen when another large bus pulls up directly alongside theirs, and he suspiciously wonders why a different group is arriving at the exact same time. The doors to the rival bus swing open, and a smug, dark-haired man steps out, flashing a cocky grin and remarking on the unexpected coincidence of seeing them here. An angry Professor Hye-yeon demands to know who these intruders are and how they found this location. While a highly annoyed Yoojun instantly recognizes the smug newcomer as Tae-sung, the pathetic loser who tried to corner Ji-yu in the alleyway. Before the mouthy punk can say another word, a portly, mustachioed older professor in a green polo shirt steps out of the bus, clearing his throat and instructing Tae-sung to let him handle the talking first. The mustachioed instructor, Professor Kang, excitedly greets Hyun, laughing about what a miraculous coincidence it is that both of their university groups have ended up at the exact same retreat. A highly skeptical Haeun crosses her arms, coldly questioning if this could truly be a simple coincidence. Professor Kang sheepishly defends himself, explaining that he simply asked one of his teaching assistants for a recommendation, and suggesting that, since they have crossed paths, their two groups should cooperate for the upcoming training sessions. But Hyun has absolutely no intention of playing nice. Without losing a single second, the fierce physical therapy expert lunges forward and delivers a devastating, high-speed kick straight into the smug professor's mana source, lifting the poor man completely off the concrete. Ji-yu and Bowen can only watch in absolute jaw-dropped horror as the badass woman ruthlessly neutralizes her rival, leaving the arrogant mustachioed idiot to weep in pure agony on the pavement. Yoojun stands frozen in absolute wide-eyed shock as he watches his badass professor suddenly deliver a devastating, high-speed kick directly into the rival professor's mana source. Tae-sung screams in pure, shivering terror for his mentor's safety, while the portly, mustachioed Professor Kang collapses onto his knees, whimpering in immense agony. However, the bizarre situation takes a highly unexpected turn when the weeping professor's expression suddenly shifts and the weird older man begins to breathlessly beg for more pain, pleading for Hyun to hit and choke him. A thoroughly disgusted Yoojun sweat drops, realizing that this is likely the real reason the creepy person followed them to the retreat in the first place. Regardless of the unsettling display, the two groups ultimately agree to coordinate their training sessions together. Assembling on the outdoor recreational court, Professor Hyun proposes a competitive tournament between their departments, with a massive cash prize on the line, to motivate the students. While both Yoojun and Tae-sung are initially highly reluctant to participate, their competitive spirits are instantly ignited when the final cash prize is revealed to be a whopping 1 million won. The battle lines are officially drawn as the kinesiology department prepares to face off against the business department, starting with a classic game of limbo where players must bend backward to duck under a bar. During the first match, a highly flexible classmate from the rival team manages to successfully clear the limbo bar despite Yoojun's high-frequency vibrating hand discharging the pole, securing an early victory for the kinesiology department. Next up is King Dodgeball, a fast-paced game where hitting the opposing team's designated king results in an immediate victory. Acting as a fiercely loyal shield, a brave Yoojun takes a brutal hit straight to his swollen cheek to protect his team's king, Bone. Unfortunately, his heroic sacrifice is short-lived, as the opposing thrower immediately follows up with a powerful shot that strikes Bones squarely in the chest, ending the match and securing a second-round win for the business department. With the score tied, the tournament transitions to the third and final game, a high-stakes wrestling match where competitors must throw their opponent to the ground while holding on to their thigh bands. Round 1 begins with Yoojun and Tae-sung locking arms in a tight, grueling grapple. As they struggle for dominance, Yoo-jun internally acknowledges that the bully is actually surprisingly strong and has clearly worked out quite a bit. Sensing his hesitation, a smug Taesung looks down and mockingly offers to lose on purpose for him. A naive Yoo-jun is briefly fooled, wondering if the guy is actually being serious, but his hopes are instantly shattered when the laughing bully calls him a complete dumbass and easily sweeps his feet, sending our protagonist crashing flat onto his back. Yoo-jun sits in the dirt, rubbing his chin and cursing his own carelessness as the rival team celebrates their 1-0 lead. Undeterred, Yoo-jun steps back onto the court for round 2, tightly gripping Taesung's thigh band as they brace for their next clash. Leaning in close, a cocky Taesung mockingly advises him to just give up, sneering that Yoo-jun is honestly weaker than his own mother. This petty insult completely triggers our protagonist, and with veins bulging on his forehead, Yoo-jun tells the bully not to mess with him, pointing out that Taesung doesn't even have a mother. As the enraged bully fires back an insult, Yoo-jun seizes his moment of distraction, leaning forward and driving his high-speed vibrating tongue directly against Taesung's neck. The sudden, high-speed vibrating stimulation completely paralyzes the bully's muscles, sending Taesung crashing helplessly onto the dirt and tying the score at 1-1. As Yoo-jun's teammates roar in celebration, a thoroughly humiliated Taesung can only glare in absolute fury at the cheating piece of trash who just defeated him. Round 3 of the intense wrestling match begins under a highly tense atmosphere. A thoroughly humiliated Taesung clenches his teeth in pure rage, furiously growling that he is absolutely going to kill Yoo-jun for his dirty tricks. A completely clueless Yoo-jun simply blinks, innocently wondering if the bully is really this angry over the silly comment about his mother, which only infuriates the raging loser even further. With a mighty yell, Yoo-jun forcefully lifts the heavy bully off the ground and drives him flat into the dirt, securing a glorious and decisive victory for the kinesiology department. With the dramatic tournament officially resolved, the scene transitions to a quiet night under a beautiful crescent moon. Inside the cozy rooms of the One Heart Training Center, the victorious students gather to celebrate their hard-earned victory, clinking their glasses together for a roaring toast over boxes of fresh pizza and beer. A classmate warmly praises Yoo-jun, letting him know how incredibly cool he was out there, and thanking him for winning them such a delicious feast. A blushing Yoo-jun sheepishly laughs it off, insisting it was absolutely nothing. Sitting right next to him, a highly flushed Bone gently pours him another drink, prompting Yoo-jun to politely thank her while caringly checking to make sure she is doing all right, since she appears to have had quite a bit to drink already. The shy girl blushes deeply, softly assuring him that she is doing perfectly fine. Their quiet conversation is suddenly interrupted by a polite knock at the door, as a female student named Juhee from the business department pops her head in to ask if Jiu is currently inside. Juhee explains that the girls from her team are incredibly eager to become friends with Jiu and asks to borrow her for just a brief moment. Although Jiu is caught off guard by the sudden request, the rest of the table warmly encourages her to go ahead and mingle. As the girls walk down the hallway, they giggly comment on how remarkably pretty Jiu is, leaving our protagonist to smile in amusement. Back in the room, Yoo-jun notices a sleepy Bowen beginning to nod off, and he gently suggests that she should probably head back to bed if she is feeling tired. When the stubborn girl quickly shakes her head to decline, Yoo-jun smiles warmly and asks if she would like to head outside for a refreshing walk together. A happy Bowen quickly nods in agreement, and the cheerful pair sets off, walking side by side down the stairs of the retreat center under the beautiful, starry night sky. Meanwhile, back in the business department's room, Jiu is busy socializing with her new friends, who are enthusiastically chatting and giving her thumbs up. However, her mind is clearly elsewhere. On the floor nearby, her smartphone screen glows with a sent text message to Yoo-jun asking what he is doing, and Jiu can only sigh to herself, realizing he is likely having too much fun to even check his messages. Sitting right beside her, a highly observant Juhee catches her disappointed expression, flashing a highly knowing smirk as she watches the pouty blonde. Little does Jiu know, Yoo-jun is indeed busy with his own activities. Under the moonlight, Yoo-jun and Bowen's peaceful walk quickly escalates into something very motivational. Tucking themselves away in a quiet, secluded spot, the two do not hesitate to kick off an incredibly intense conditioning session.